In the stillness of the night, when the world grows quiet, the past whispers its darkest secrets. Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where we unravel the chilling truths behind crimes that linger like ghosts in the corners of history. Tonight, in Volume 33, we bring you 12 haunting true crime stories, tales of betrayal, desperation, and cold-blooded calculation that will pull you into the shadows. Each case is a puzzle pieced together from the fragments of lives shattered by choices no one could undo. As the rain falls softly outside, let these stories wrap around you, a tapestry of suspense, woven with the threads of human darkness. From a brutal prison murder to a digital predator's deadly charm, these accounts will keep you on edge, wondering what lies just beyond the light. Settle in, dim the lights, and let the black screen draw you into a world where truth is stranger and far more terrifying than fiction. This is Shadows of the Past, and tonight, the rain carries the weight of secrets too heavy to stay buried. Story 1, The Brutal Murder of Luther Plant. The air inside the United States Penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas, was thick with tension on that January day in 2008. Known as the Bloody Beaumont, this federal prison housed some of the nation's most dangerous men who had long since traded humanity for survival. In the dim concrete corridors, where every glance could spark a fight, a single act of violence would soon etch itself into the annals of true crime. This is the story of Luther Plant, a man whose life ended in a storm of rage. In Shannon Wayne Agofsky, the inmate who would face the ultimate price for his brutality. As the rain taps against your window tonight, let's step into the shadows of that fateful day, where the line between justice and vengeance blurred in blood. Now, Luther Plant was no saint. Like every soul locked within Beaumont's walls, he carried a past heavy with mistakes. But on January 5th, 2008, he was just another inmate, navigating the unspoken rules of a world where weakness was a death sentence. Little did he know that his final moments were ticking closer, orchestrated by a man whose heart had long since hardened. Shannon Wayne Agofsky, a 37-year-old lifer, was a predator in a cage, convicted years earlier for bank robbery and murder. Agofsky was no stranger to violence. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the prison yard for his next target. What sparked his hatred for Plant remains a mystery. Some say it was a debt unpaid, others a fleeting disrespect. But in a place like Beaumont, reasons were often just excuses for chaos. The attack came without warning. Surveillance footage, grainy but unforgiving, captured the moment Agofsky cornered Plant in a secluded corner of the recreation area. The time was 2:17 p.m., a moment that would haunt investigators for years. Plant, unaware of the storm brewing behind him, stood alone, his back to the wall. Agofsky moved with purpose, his fists clenched, his boots heavy on the concrete. Witnesses, other inmates who knew better than to intervene, later described the scene as a blur of fury. Agofsky struck first, a blow to Plant's head that sent him staggering. But this was no ordinary fight. What followed was a massacre. Agofsky didn't stop at a punch. He grabbed Plant, slamming him to the ground with a force that echoed through the yard. As Plant gasped for air, Agofsky's boots came down. Again and again and again. The stomping was relentless, targeting Plant's head and neck with a precision that spoke of intent. Blood pooled beneath the fallen man, staining the concrete a sickly crimson. Inmates watched in silence, their faces masks of indifference honed by years behind bars. Guards, alerted by the commotion, arrived too late. By the time they pulled Agofsky away, Luther Plant was unrecognizable, his skull fractured, his life slipping away with every shallow breath. The prison infirmary was no place for miracles. Plant was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the damage was catastrophic. Multiple skull fractures, brain hemorrhaging, and a crushed windpipe left no hope. At 4:32 p.m., Luther Plant was pronounced dead, his story cut short in a place designed to contain men, not save them. But this was only the beginning. The death of an inmate, even in a hellhole like Beaumont, demanded answers. And as investigators began to peel back the layers of that brutal afternoon, they uncovered a case that would test the limits of justice itself. Agofsky was no stranger to the system. His rap sheet read like a roadmap of destruction. Bank heists, bombings, and a murder that had already earned him a life sentence. But this time, the stakes were higher. The federal government doesn't take kindly to murder within its walls, and Agofsky's actions were about to drag him into the crosshairs of the death penalty. Charged with 2 counts of capital murder, he faced a trial that would lay bare the savagery of his crime. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture, a man who didn't just kill, but reveled in it. The surveillance footage played in court was damning, each stomp a deliberate act, each pause a moment to savor the destruction. Prosecution's case was built on more than just the tape. Witnesses, though reluctant, came forward under pressure. One inmate, a lifer with nothing to lose, testified that Agofsky had bragged about teaching Plant a lesson. Days before the attack, another claimed Agofsky had been seen pacing the yard, muttering about settling a score. Physical evidence sealed the deal. Blood on Agofsky's boots matched Plant's DNA, and the pattern of injuries suggested a calculated effort to ensure death. Premeditation, the prosecution argued, was written in every blow. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment brawl. This was execution. Agofsky's defense team faced an uphill battle. They argued the attack was spontaneous, a product of the prison's volatile environment where tempers flare and fists fly. Agofsky, they claimed, was a man shaped by his surroundings, his violence a reflex honed by years of survival. They pointed to his troubled past, abuse, addiction, a life spiraling toward crime from adolescence. But the jury wasn't swayed. The footage was too brutal, the intent too clear. After deliberating for just 6 hours, they returned with a verdict, guilty on both counts. The sentencing phase was even swifter. On April 14, 2008, Shannon Wayne Agofsky was sentenced to death by lethal injection. But the story doesn't end with the gavel's fall. Agofsky's case became a lightning rod for debate, exposing the underbelly of America's prison system. Beaumont was a pressure cooker, understaffed and overcrowded, where guards turned a blind eye to brewing conflicts. Plant's death wasn't just a murder, it was a symptom of a system failing its inmates and its staff. Advocacy groups seized the moment, arguing that prisons like Beaumont bred violence rather than curbed it. How could rehabilitation exist in a place where survival meant striking first? Others, though, saw Agofsky's sentence as justice served, a rare moment of accountability in a world where inmate deaths often went unpunished. Agofsky himself showed little remorse. In interviews from death row, he spoke in clipped tones, deflecting blame onto the prison, onto Plant, onto fate itself. "It's just how things go in there," he said once, his voice flat as if discussing the weather. His appeals dragged on for years, each one a faint hope to delay the inevitable. But the courts held firm. On July 17, 2020, 12 years after that blood-soaked afternoon, Agofsky's time ran out. At the federal execution chamber in Terre Haute, Indiana, he was strapped to a gurney, the needle poised. His final words, if any, were never made public. At 6:23 p.m., the drugs flowed, and Shannon Wayne Agofsky was no more. Luther Plant's name faded from headlines, but his death left ripples. His family, estranged and scattered, mourned in silence, their grief overshadowed by the stigma of his incarceration. Friends from his old life, before the crimes that landed him in Beaumont, spoke of a man who once dreamed of redemption, a man who might have found it if not for the wrong place, the wrong time, the wrong enemy. The prison itself faced scrutiny, with reports of tightened security and staff retraining, though whispers persisted that little had truly changed. As the rain falls tonight, imagine the echoes of that day in Beaumont. The scuff of boots on concrete, the muffled cries, the silence that followed. Shannon Wayne Agofsky's story is a grim reminder that even in a place built to contain chaos, darkness finds a way to thrive. Was he a monster forged by the system, or a man who chose his path long before the bars closed around him? And what of Luther Plant, a life extinguished in a moment of rage? Did justice truly serve him, or was it too late to matter? These questions linger unanswered in the shadows of the past. But our journey isn't over. 11 more stories await, each one a descent into the human heart's darkest corners. From a gold heist that unraveled a city to a digital predator who turned love into a weapon, the night is long and the secrets are many. Stay with us as the rain carries you deeper into the unknown. Story 2, the Perth Mint Swindle and the Mickelberg Brothers. In the golden haze of Western Australia, where ambition and greed burned brighter than a desert sun, a crime unfolded that would shake a nation. It was June 22, 1982, when $653,000, 0 cents worth of gold bullion, vanished from the Perth Mint. A heist so audacious, it seemed ripped from the pages of a thriller. But what began as a daring robbery spiraled into a saga of betrayal, corruption, and a family's fight for truth. This is the story of the Mickelberg brothers, Ray, Peter, and Brian, 3 men accused of a crime that would haunt them for decades. As the rain falls softly tonight, step into the shadows of Perth, where justice was buried beneath lies, and the real thieves slipped into the night. The Perth Mint, a fortress of wealth and prestige, stood as a symbol of Australia's golden promise. On that fateful morning in 1982, its vaults held bars of pure gold, each one a fortune waiting to be claimed. The heist was deceptively simple. 49 gold bars weighing 68 kilograms were replaced with worthless replicas. The thieves used forged checks, posing as legitimate couriers to walk away with the treasure. No guns, no masks, just a brazen confidence that left the mint reeling. By the time the ruse was discovered, the gold was gone, melted down or hidden, its trail vanishing into the underbelly of Perth's criminal world. The audacity of the crime sent shockwaves through Australia, and the police were under pressure to deliver answers fast. Enter the Mickelberg brothers, Ray, Peter, and Brian. Ray, the eldest at 37, was a former SAS soldier turned helicopter pilot, a man whose charm and grit made him a local legend. Peter, 34, was the quiet strategist, a mechanic with a sharp mind for detail. Brian, the youngest at 31, was a dreamer, always chasing the next big score. They were a tight-knit trio, known for their loyalty and their knack for skirting the edges of the law. To the police, they were the perfect suspects, men with the skills, the nerve, and just enough reputation to pull off a heist of this magnitude. But perfection, as the Mickelbergs would learn, was a dangerous illusion. The investigation zeroed in on the brothers with relentless focus. Detectives, led by the formidable Don Hancock, a cop with the reputation for getting results, believed they had their men. Hancock was no ordinary officer. He was a force, a man who bent rules to fit his version of justice. The evidence against the Mickelbergs, though, was thin. Too thin, some whispered. A fingerprint on a forged check, a dubious witness claiming to have seen Ray near the mint, and a hunch that the brothers' lifestyle didn't match their income. It wasn't enough for a conviction, not yet, but Hancock wasn't the type to let details stand in his way. What followed was a masterclass in coercion. The brothers were arrested in a blaze of publicity, their faces splashed across newspapers as the gold thieves who dared to rob the mint. Ray, Peter, and Brian maintained their innocence, but the police had other plans. Interrogations stretched into the night, hours of pressure that blurred the line between questioning and torture. Ray later described being stripped naked, beaten, and threatened with fabricated charges. Peter spoke of promises: confess and you'll walk, resist and you'll rot. Brian, the youngest, crumbled under the weight, signing a confession he'd later recant, claiming it was coerced under threats to his family. The brothers' story was consistent. They were being framed, pawns, in a game rigged by cops desperate for a win. The evidence, when it came, was a house of cards. A key piece was the testimony of a police informant, a shady figure with a rap sheet longer than the Mickelbergs. He claimed to have overheard the brothers plotting the heist, but his story shifted with every telling, his motives tied to a reduced sentence. Then there was the gold itself, or rather, its absence. Police raided the Mickelbergs' properties, tearing apart homes and businesses, but found no trace of the bullion. Instead, they presented a single gold bar, allegedly recovered from a tip-off, with Ray's fingerprint conveniently embedded in its surface. To the prosecution, it was a smoking gun. To the defense, it was a plant, a piece of evidence too perfect to be true. The trial, held in 1983, was a spectacle. Perth's courthouse buzzed with reporters, onlookers, and a public hungry for justice, or at least a good story. The prosecution painted the Mickelbergs as masterminds, a trio of cunning criminals who used their military and mechanical skills to outsmart the mint. The forged checks, they argued, bore the brothers' meticulous planning. The fingerprint, they claimed, was undeniable proof, but cracks in the case were impossible to ignore. The informant's credibility was shaky, his testimony riddled with contradictions. The gold bar's fingerprint raised eyebrows. Experts testified it was unusually clear, as if pressed deliberately, not left in the chaos of a heist. And the brothers' alibis, backed by witnesses, placed them far from the mint on the day of the crime. The defense fought hard, but the tide was against them. Hancock's influence loomed large, his reputation cowing those who might question the evidence. The jury, swayed by the narrative of a daring heist and the brothers' rough-around-the-hedges personas, delivered their verdict: guilty. Ray and Peter were sentenced to 20 years each, Brian to 16. As the gavel fell, the brothers stood defiant, their eyes burning with a promise to fight on. But behind bars, the weight of their convictions settled like dust. Perth moved on, the gold remained lost, and the Mickelbergs became a cautionary tale, until the truth began to claw its way out. Prison was no place for innocence. Ray, hardened by his SAS days, endured the isolation, his mind fixed on clearing their names. Peter buried himself in legal texts, searching for a way to unravel the case. Brian struggled most, his spirit fraying under the stigma of a thief. Outside, their mother, Peggy, became their fiercest advocate, a lone voice insisting her sons were victims of a corrupt system. She dug into the case, uncovering whispers of police misconduct, officers with ties to organized crime, evidence that vanished or appeared too conveniently. Her persistence caught the ear of a few journalists who began to question the official story. Was the Perth Mint swindle less about the Mickelbergs and more about protecting someone or something else? The first crack came in 1989 when a new witness emerged. A former cellmate of the informant claimed the man had bragged about lying to frame the Mickelbergs, paid off by police with cash and a lighter sentence. The revelation sparked a fresh appeal, but the courts were unmoved, dismissing the testimony as hearsay. The brothers' hopes flickered, but Peggy pressed on, her resolve unyielding. Then, in 2001, a bombshell. Don Hancock, the detective who built the case, was killed in a car bombing. The attack, linked to a biker gang feud, raised questions about Hancock's own dealings. Rumors swirled that he'd been involved in shadier circles, possibly even connected to the real thieves. Could the Mickelbergs have been scapegoats, framed to cover a deeper conspiracy? The truth began to surface in 2002 when a retired detective, Tony Lebendowski, came forward with a confession that shook Western Australia. Lebendowski, once Hancock's right-hand man, admitted to fabricating evidence against the Mickelbergs. The gold bar with Ray's fingerprint, a fake, crafted in a police lab to seal the case. The informant's testimony, coached, word for word, by Hancock himself. Lewandowski's motives were murky: guilt, fear, or a need to clear his conscience. But his words were dynamite. He described a culture of corruption within the force, where results trumped truth, and the Mickelbergs were collateral damage in Hancock's quest for glory. Lewandowski's confession wasn't enough on its own. The brothers needed hard evidence, and they found it in the unlikeliest of places. A police vault. Documents long buried revealed discrepancies in the chain of custody for the gold bar. Forensic tests conducted with new technology confirmed the fingerprint was a plant. Its clarity impossible under natural conditions. The informant, now a broken man, recanted his testimony, admitting he'd been coerced with threats of prison time. Piece by piece, the case against the Mickelbergs unraveled, exposing a web of lies spun by those sworn to uphold the law. In 2004, after 22 years of fighting, the Western Australian Court of Appeal delivered a historic ruling. The convictions of Ray, Peter, and Brian Mickelberg were quashed, their names cleared at last. The courtroom was silent as the brothers, now graying and weathered, embraced their mother, tears cutting through years of pain. But freedom came with a bitter edge. Brian had died in 1987, killed in a plane crash while on parole, never living to see his vindication. Ray and Peter, though free, carried scars no court could heal. Years lost, relationships fractured, a reputation tarnished by a lie. The aftermath was a reckoning. In January 2008, the Western Australian government awarded Ray and Peter $500,000, 0 cents each, in ex gratia payments, a gesture of amends for their suffering. The police issued a rare apology, acknowledging the miscarriage of justice that had stolen decades from the brothers' lives. But the gold, the heart of the crime, remained a ghost. No one was ever charged with the heist itself, and theories abounded. A syndicate tied to Hancock, a rogue Mint employee, or even a cover-up to protect powerful figures. The bullion, likely melted and scattered, was a fortune lost to time, its secrets buried deeper than the Mickelbergs' truth. The Perth Mint swindle is more than a robbery. It's a mirror held to the flaws of justice. The Mickelbergs were not angels. Petty crimes dotted their past, but they were not the masterminds police needed them to be. Their story exposes a system where power could bend truth, where a single detective's ambition could ruin lives. Don Hancock's shadow looms large. A man whose pursuit of results left a trail of destruction. Was he protecting someone higher up? Or simply drunk on his own authority? And the gold? Where did it go? And who walked away richer while the brothers paid the price? As the rain drums against your window, picture the Mickelberg standing outside that courtroom in 2004, free but forever changed. Ray, the soldier, his defiance tempered by loss. Peter, the thinker, his faith in justice shaken but unbroken. And Brian, a memory, his voice silenced before the truth could set him free. Their fight reshaped Western Australia, forcing reforms to police oversight and evidence handling. But it came too late for them. The real thieves, whoever they were, slipped into the shadows, their laughter echoing in the gold they stole. The night stretches on, and more stories wait to unfold. Tales of violence, deception, and the human cost of crime. From a soldier's betrayal in Singapore to a lawyer's fall from grace, the past holds its secrets close. Stay with us as the rain carries you deeper into the darkness, where every truth comes at a price. Story 3, Dave Teo Ming's firearm offense. In the heart of Singapore, a city where order reigns and the streets hum with disciplined precision, a single night in September 2007 shattered the illusion of safety. A young man barely out of his teens slipped away from his military camp, a stolen rifle in his hands, and set a nation on edge. His name was Dave Teo Ming, a 20-year-old national serviceman whose descent into desperation would spark a manhunt unlike any single. As the rain falls gently tonight, let's walk the neon-lit streets of Orchard Road, where a troubled soul carried a weapon and a heart full of pain, and where one wrong move could have turned a city's pulse to panic. This is a story of duty, betrayal, and the thin line between a cry for help and catastrophe. Singapore's national service is a rite of passage, a 2-year crucible that forges boys into men under the weight of discipline and responsibility. For Dave Teo Ming, it was supposed to be a path to stability. Born into a fractured family, Teo's early years were marked by shadows, poverty, domestic strife, and a father whose absence left wounds that never healed. By 2007, he was a full-time soldier in the Singapore Armed Forces, stationed at Mandai Hill Camp, entrusted with the tools of defense. An SAR-21 assault rifle, a weapon capable of unleashing chaos in the wrong hands. To his comrades, Teo was quiet, unassuming, a boy who kept his struggles locked away. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one that would spill on the Singapore streets in a way no one could predict. September 2, 2007 began like any other day at Mandai Hill. The camp buzzed with routine drills, briefings, the clatter of boots on asphalt. Teo, assigned to guard duty, stood at his post, the SAR-21 slung across his shoulder. 8 live rounds and a bayonet were standard issue, a reminder of the trust placed in him. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something snapped. At 9:43 p.m., Teo walked away from his post, slipping through the camp's perimeter with the rifle and ammunition. No alarm sounded, no shouts followed. He was a ghost, vanishing into the night, his intentions a mystery that would soon grip a nation. By midnight, the Singapore Armed Forces realized their soldier was gone, and so was a lethal weapon. A missing rifle wasn't just a breach, it was a crisis. Singapore, a city-state where gun ownership is virtually non-existent and crime is meticulously controlled, faced a nightmare scenario. An armed deserter loose in its streets. The police were alerted, and a manhunt began, code-named Operation Firearm. Roadblocks sprang up across the island. From Jurong to Changi, elite units, including the Gurkha contingent, fanned out, their orders clear. Find Teo, recover the weapon, and prevent disaster. The public, initially unaware, slept soundly, oblivious to the danger threading through their city. But Theo's path took him to Orchard Road, Singapore's glittering commercial heart. Neon signs bathed the streets in electric hues, shoppers and tourists weaving through malls and cafes. It was here, in the early hours of September 3, that Theo's story took a darker turn. He wasn't alone. Eng Boon Jun, a 22-year-old friend and fellow serviceman, had joined him, drawn into Theo's unraveling world. The pair moved through the crowds, the rifle concealed in a bag, its presence a ticking bomb. Theo's target wasn't random violence, though. At least not yet. His mind was fixed on a personal wound. His ex-girlfriend, Crystal, a 19-year-old who had ended their relationship months earlier. Crystal's rejection had cut deep, the blow to Theo's already fragile sense of self. Friends later described him as obsessive, unable to let go, his messages to her growing increasingly desperate. That night, he tracked her to Orchard Road, where she worked at a nightclub. At 2:15 a.m. outside the club's pulsing doors, Theo confronted her. Words turned to threats, the rifle's shadow looming as he demanded answers, closure, anything to quell the chaos in his heart. Crystal, terrified but composed, refused to engage. Aang, standing nearby, urged Theo to walk away, but the moment teetered on the edge of violence. A single pull of the trigger could have turned Orchard Road into a bloodbath. Fate, or perhaps luck, intervened. Passers-by noticed the tension, the bulge of the bag, the wild look in Theo's eyes. A whispered call to the police sent sirens screaming toward Orchard Road. Theo and Angsh fled, weaving through alleys, but Singapore's surveillance network, cameras on every corner, made escape impossible. At 3:47 a.m. on September 4, police cornered them in a side street near Cathay Cineplex. Theo, exhausted and out of options, surrendered without a shot. The SAR-21, still loaded, was recovered, its 8 rounds untouched. Aang, pale and trembling, followed suit. The city exhaled, but the questions were just beginning. Theo's arrest was front-page news, a rare blemish on Singapore's polished image, charged with unlawful possession of a firearm, possession of live ammunition, and criminal intimidation for threatening Crystal. He faced the full weight of the law. Aang was charged as an accomplice, accused of aiding Theo's escape and failing to report the desertion. The military court of appeal loomed, a tribunal where discipline was non-negotiable. But as investigators dug into Theo's life, the story grew more complex than a simple act of rebellion. This wasn't just a soldier gone rogue. It was a young man unraveling under pressures no one had seen coming. House's background painted a portrait of struggle. Orphaned by his mother's death and abandoned by his father, he'd been raised by relatives, bouncing between homes with little stability. School was a battleground. Bullying, poor grades, a sense of never belonging. National service, meant to be his anchor, became another weight. Friends described him as loyal but haunted, his breakup with Crystal tipping him into despair. Psychiatric evaluations ordered after his arrest revealed depression and adjustment disorder, conditions that had gone undiagnosed during his service. Had the military missed the signs, or was Theo's pain too well hidden? The trial, held in 2008, was a clash of perspectives. The prosecutors portrayed Theo as a reckless threat, a soldier who betrayed his oath and endangered a city. The rifle, they argued, wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of trust violated. A conviction under Singapore's Arms Offences Act carried mandatory imprisonment and caning, a punishment as physical as it was symbolic. The prosecution leaned on the facts: Theo's desertion, his threats to Crystal, the 12-hour manhunt that paralyzed Singapore. He held a loaded weapon in a crowded street, the lead prosecutor said, his voice steady. One moment of impulse and lives would have been lost. The defense, led by a seasoned lawyer, took a different tack. Theo wasn't a criminal mastermind. They argued he was a broken boy, pushed beyond his limits by a system that demanded strength he didn't have. They called witnesses, comrades who spoke of Theo's quiet diligence, relatives who recounted his lonely childhood, a psychiatrist who detailed his mental health struggles. The breakup with Crystal, they claimed, was the final straw, triggering an impulsive act, not a calculated crime. Dave Theo didn't want to hurt anyone, his lawyer said, his words hanging in the courtroom. He wanted to be heard, and no one was listening. Ainge's role complicated the narrative. His defense argued he was a bystander swept up in Theo's chaos out of loyalty, not malice. He hadn't touched the rifle, hadn't threatened anyone, but his failure to report T.O. made him complicit. Ainge family pleaded for leniency, described him as a good son caught in a bad moment. The court, though, was unmoved by sentiment. Singapore's military justice system prized accountability, and both men would pay for their choices. On June 18, 2008, the verdicts came down. Dave Teo Ming was sentenced to 9 years and 2 months in prison with 6 strokes of the cane, a punishment that would leave scars, physical and otherwise. Eng Boon Jun received 5 years and 6 strokes, his lesser role acknowledged but not excused. The courtroom was silent as the sentences were read, Teo's face blank, Eng's eyes fixed on the floor. Outside, reporters swarmed, their headlines screaming of discipline restored. But for those who knew Teo, the story wasn't so simple. The aftermath was a reckoning for Singapore. The SAF faced scrutiny. How had a soldier walked away with a rifle undetected? Why were there no mental health checks for a man clearly struggling? The military responded with reforms, tighter weapons security, mandatory psychological screenings, and stricter oversight of guard posts. Mandai Hill Camp became a case study on what could go wrong when vigilance faltered. Public discourse, rare in a city that valued harmony, erupted. Some saw Teo as a villain, a traitor who risked lives. Others saw a victim, a young man failed by a system that didn't see his pain. Teo's time in Changi prison was a descent into routine. Days of labor, nights of reflection, letters from his sister, one of the few family members who stood by him, offered slivers of hope. Crystal, shaken but unharmed, moved on, her name fading from the story. Eng, serving his shorter sentence, kept his head down, his future uncertain. Both men carried the weight of their actions, but Tito's burden was heavier. The cane's sting faded, but the label of deserter clung like damp air. Singapore's streets returned to their rhythm, Orchard Road's lights as bright as ever, but the memory of that night lingered, a crack in the city's armor. Teo's story wasn't about a spree of violence. It was about a single, desperate act that could have been so much worse. What drove him to that edge? Was it love, loss, or a system that asked too much of a boy still finding his way? And what of the rifle? Its 8 rounds, a silent threat that never spoke. These questions hang unanswered, like mist over the city. Right. The SAF's reforms were a step, but they couldn't erase the human cost. Teo's case sparked conversations about mental health in national service, a topic once taboo. Counselors were added to camps, hotlines established, but change was slow. For every soldier who spoke up, how many stayed silent, their struggles buried under duty's weight? Teo, released in 2016 after serving his sentence, vanished from the public eye. Some say he rebuilt his life quietly. Others, that the scars, seen and unseen, never healed. As the rain whispers outside, picture Dave Teo Ming standing alone on Orchard Road, the rifle's weight pulling him down. Imagine the city holding its breath, unaware of the danger in its midst. His story is a warning of what happens when pain festers, when systems fail to see the human behind the uniform. Was he a criminal? Or a casualty of a world that didn't listen? The truth lies somewhere in the shadows, where the past guards its secrets. And story 4, the closure of Yab Yum Brothel. In the heart of Amsterdam, where canals reflect the glow of red lights and freedom wears a provocative mask, a legendary institution thrived for decades. Yab Yum, a name whispered with reverence and infamy, was more than a brothel. It was a palace of desire, a place where fantasies were bought and secrets were kept. But in January 2008, the velvet curtains fell, and Yab Yum was shuttered, its doors locked, by a city that could no longer ignore the darkness festering within. This is the story of a criminal empire hidden behind silk sheets, of the Hell's Angels who turned pleasure into power, and of a reckoning that exposed the cost of indulgence. As the rain taps softly tonight, step into the neon-lit streets of Amsterdam's red light district, where every shadow holds a secret and trust is a currency few can afford. Yab Yum was no ordinary brothel. Opened in 1976, it stood on Single Canal, its elegant facade a stark contrast to the gritty alleys of the Wallen. Inside, chandeliers cast a golden glow over plush lounges where champagne flowed, and clients, politicians, businessmen, celebrities, mingled with women whose beauty was matched only by their discretion. For 30 years, Yab Yum was a legend, a symbol of Amsterdam's liberal ethos, where sex work was legal, regulated, and celebrated as art. Prices started at 300 guilders an hour, a fortune that promised exclusivity and escape. To the world, it was a glittering success, a place where desire met sophistication. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding, one written in blood, money, and betrayal. By the early 2000s, whispers of trouble began to surface. Yab Yum's owner, Theo Hooft, a shrewd businessman who built the brothel into an empire, was losing his grip. The sex trade, even in Amsterdam's regulated paradise, was a magnet for crime. Drug deals, extortion, and human trafficking lurked in the shadows of the red light district, and Yab Yum, with its high-profile clientele and rivers of cash, was a prize too tempting to ignore. Enter the Hells Angels, the notorious motorcycle gang whose leather vests and roaring bikes were a symbol of rebellion and ruthless ambition. By 2006, the Angels had sunk their claws into Yab Yum, transforming it from a house of pleasure into a hub of organized crime. The rain-soaked streets outside carried the weight of their presence, a storm brewing in the city's underbelly. The Hells Angels didn't storm Yab Yum with guns blazing. Their takeover was subtle, insidious, a slow poison seeping into the brothel's veins. It began with protection offers. Pay us, and your business stays safe. Hoff caught between pride and pragmatism, resisted at first, but the Angels were relentless. Former employees, speaking years later under anonymity, described a chilling shift. Men in leather began appearing at the bar, their tattoos a warning, their eyes scanning for weakness. Workers were pressured to push drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, on clients, turning Yab Yum into a covert marketplace. Cash, once meticulously accounted for, started disappearing, funneled into the Angels' coffers through money laundering schemes. The brothel's glamour masked a grim reality. It was no longer a business, but a front. The women of Yab Yum, the heart of its allure, bore the brunt of the change. Many were independent sex workers, drawn to the brothel's reputation for safety and high earnings. But under the Angel's shadow, safety eroded. Threats became routine. Refuse to sell drugs, and you'd face consequences. Some women reported being coerced into unpaid favors for gang members. Their protests met with intimidation. One worker, her voice trembling in a later interview, recalled a night when an Angel pressed a knife to her throat, demanding she hand over her night's earnings. It wasn't about sex anymore, she said. It was about control. The clients, blissfully unaware, sipped their drinks, blind to the fear behind the smiles. Amsterdam's authorities, long proud of their progressive stance on sex work, were slow to act. Yab Yum operated under a legal license, its taxes paid, its records clean, at least on paper. But by 2006, the police were picking up troubling signals. Undercover operations in the red light district revealed a spike in drug trafficking, with Yab Yum as the nexus. Informants whispered of money laundering, of cash from drug sales being washed through the brothel's account. The Hells Angels, already under scrutiny for violent turf wars, were the common thread. The city's tolerance for liberal policies was being tested, and Yab Yum was the crucible where ideals clashed with reality. The turning point came in 2007 when a series of raids rocked Amsterdam's underworld. Police, armed with wiretaps and tip-offs, stormed properties linked to the Hells Angels, seizing drugs, weapons, and stacks of cash. Yab Yum wasn't spared. On a cold November night, officers swept through the brothel, their flashlights cutting through the dim lounges. Workers were questioned, clients ushered out, and records confiscated. The raid uncovered what many had suspected. Ledgers showing untraceable transactions, traces of cocaine on tables, and a back room where gang members held court. Theo Hooft, summoned to explain, claimed ignorance, insisting Yab Yum was a victim of circumstance. But the evidence told a different story. The city's response was swift and unprecedented. In January 2008, Amsterdam's mayor, Job Cohen, revoked Yab Yum's operating license, a move that sent shockwaves through the red light district. The official reason was clear. The brothel had been infiltrated by organized crime. its operations inseparable from the Hells Angels' web. Cohen, a staunch defender of regulated sex work, called the decision a necessary evil. Yab Yum wasn't just closed, it was erased. Its name struck from the city's registry, its doors chained shut. For the first time in decades, the lights on Singchao Canal went dark, and the brothel's legend became a cautionary tale. You've fought back, his pride wounded as much as his wallet. He filed lawsuits, arguing the closure was unfair, that Yab Yum was being punished for crimes it didn't commit. His lawyers claimed the police had overreached, using flimsy evidence to justify a political move. The courts, however, saw it differently. Wiretaps revealed conversations between Angels members, casually discussing Yab Yum as their house. Bank records showed millions in unexplained deposits, far exceeding the brothel's reported earnings. A former manager, granted immunity, testified to weekly cash drops to gang leaders, each one a tribute to keep the Angels at bay. Hugh's pleas fell on deaf ears, and in 2009, the Dutch Supreme Court upheld the closure, sealing Yab Yum's fate. The investigation didn't stop at the brothel's doors. The Hells Angels, emboldened by years of impunity, became Amsterdam's public enemy number one. Police launched a broader crackdown targeting the gang's clubhouses, drug labs, and money laundering fronts. Arrests piled up. Dozens of members faced charges, from drug trafficking to extortion. Yab Yum's closure was a catalyst, a signal that Amsterdam's tolerance had limits. The gang's grip on the city weakened, though their shadow lingered, a reminder of how deeply crime could burrow into even the most open societies. For the women of Yab Yum, the closure was a double-edged sword. Some mourned the loss of a workplace that, at its peak, offered independence and security. Others saw it as liberation, a chance to escape the Angels' chokehold. Many moved to other brothels or left sex work entirely, their stories fading into Amsterdam's crowded streets. One worker, speaking to a documentary crew years later, described the final night. "We packed our things in silence. The clients were gone. The music stopped. It felt like a funeral." Her words carried the weight of a world dismantled, a dream tainted by greed. Theo Humphrey treated from the spotlight, his empire reduced to memories. Rumors swirled that he'd known more about the Angels than he let on, that his resistance was a performance to save face. He died in 2016, taking his secret to the grave. Yab Yum itself became a ghost. Its building repurposed into offices, the chandeliers long gone, but its name lived on. A symbol of Amsterdam's paradox, a city that embraced freedom yet couldn't outrun the darkness it invited. The gold bullion from the Perth Mint swindle may have vanished, but Yab Yum's fall was a different kind of theft. A robbery of trust, of ideals, of a city's soul. The broader impact was profound. Amsterdam's sex industry, once a model for the world, faced new scrutiny. Regulations tightened with stricter licensing and financial oversight to weed out criminal fronts. Police trained their sights on money laundering, a crime that thrived in the cash-heavy world of sex work. The public, too, began to question the red light district's allure. Was it empowerment or exploitation dressed in silk? The debate raged, fueled by stories of women coerced and clients deceived. Yab Yum's closure wasn't just the end of a brothel. It was a mirror held to a city's contradictions. The Hells Angels, though weakened, didn't vanish. They adapted, shifting their operations to less visible corners of Europe. Amsterdam learned a hard lesson. No institution, no matter how iconic, was immune to corruption. Yab Yum's fall exposed the fragility of regulated vice, where legality offered no shield against ambition. The gang's fingerprints were everywhere, on the drugs, the cash, the fear in the workers' eyes. And yet no single figure was ever convicted for Yab Yum's downfall. The Angels, like the gold thieves of Perth, slipped through the cracks, their laughter echoing in the profits they reaped. As the rain falls tonight, imagine the empty halls of Yab Yum, the chandeliers dim, the mirrors reflecting nothing but silence. Picture the women packing their lives into bags, their futures uncertain. See Theo Huff standing alone on Single Canal, watching his dream crumble under the weight of choices he couldn't undo. Was Yab Yum a victim of its own success, or a willing pawn in a game it couldn't win? And what of Amsterdam, a city that prided itself on freedom yet found its heart entangled in chains? These questions linger, unanswered, in the neon glow of the past. But the night stretches on and more stories await. Tales of murder, fraud, and justice warped by human hands. From a hiker's tragic end to a schoolboy's violent outburst, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness whispers truths too heavy to ignore. Story 5, The Murder of Meredith Emerson. In the quiet embrace of Georgia's Blood Mountain, where ancient trails wind through forests thick with secrets, a young woman set out to greet the new year with hope. Her name was Meredith Emerson, a 24-year-old whose laughter could light up the darkest paths. But on January 1, 2008, her hike became a descent into horror, her life stolen by a predator who thrived in the shadows. Gary Michael Hilton, a drifter with a trail of blood behind him, turned a place of solace into a graveyard. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's tread the frost-kissed trails of the Appalachian wilderness, where a vibrant soul was silenced and the community's search for answers uncovered a darkness far deeper than the forest itself. This is a story of loss, resilience, and the relentless hunt for a killer who thought he could outrun justice. Meredith Emerson was a wanderer at heart. A University of Georgia graduate with a degree in French, she was a free spirit who found peace in the outdoors. Her dog, Ella, a loyal black Labrador, was her constant companion, bounding alongside her on hikes through the Chattahoochee National Forest. On New Year's Day 2008, with the air crisp and the sky clear, Meredith laced up her boots and headed to Blood Mountain, a rugged peak in the Appalachian Trail known for its sweeping views and challenging paths. She parked her car at the Byron Reese trailhead, clipped Ella's leash, and stepped into the wilderness, unaware that she was being watched. Blood Mountain was no stranger to hikers. Its trails, etched into the earth by centuries of footsteps, drew adventurers seeking solitude or a brush with nature's raw beauty. But that day, the forest held a different presence. A man whose eyes gleamed with malice. Gary Michael Hilton, 61, was a drifter, a chameleon who blended into the margins of society. With a weathered face and a disarming smile, he was the kind of stranger you'd pass without a second glance. But Hilton was no ordinary wanderer. Behind his unassuming demeanor lay a predator, a serial killer whose appetite for violence had already claimed lives across the Southeast. Meredith, vibrant and unsuspecting, was about to cross his path. Hilton had been stalking the trails for weeks, a vulture circling for prey. He survived on odd jobs, scams, and the spoils of his crimes, drifting between campsites in a beat-up van. His method was chillingly simple: target vulnerable hikers, isolate them, and strike. Blood Mountain, with its remote paths and sparse winter crowds, was a perfect hunting ground. Meredith, alone save for Ella, fit his profile. A young woman, confident but unguarded, far from help. As she climbed the trail, her backpack bouncing lightly, Hilton followed, his steps silent, his intent lethal. The attack came, swiftly. Somewhere near the summit, Hilton approached under a pretense, perhaps asking for directions, perhaps offering a friendly word. Meredith, raised to be kind, paused to engage. It was all he needed. In a flash, he overpowered her, his strength surprising for a man of his age. Ella barked, lunging to protect her owner, but Hilton was prepared. He subdued the dog, tying her to a tree, and turned his focus to Meredith. Bound and gagged, she was dragged off the trail, her cries muffled by the forest's indifference. The mountain, a place of refuge, became her prison. For 4 agonizing days, Meredith was Hilton's captive. He moved her through the wilderness, evading the sparse hikers who braved the January cold. His goal was cruelly pragmatic: access her bank account. Using her ATM card, he forced her to reveal her PIN, withdrawing small amounts to avoid suspicion. Meredith, fighting for survival, complied, her mind racing for a way out. But Hilton's plans were darker. He wasn't just after money. He was a killer, and his time with Meredith was running out. On January 4, in a secluded clearing, he ended her life with brutal force, striking her head with a tire iron until she lay still. Her body, hidden beneath leaves and branches, was left to the elements, a final act of erasure. Meredith's disappearance didn't go unnoticed. When she failed to return home, her roommate raised the alarm. Her car, still parked at the trailhead, was a chilling clue. Ella, found tethered to a tree by a passing hiker, was frantic but unharmed, her presence a silent plea for help. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, launched a search, one of the largest in the state's history. Helicopters buzzed over Blood Mountain. their blades slicing through the fog. Volunteers, friends, and family combed the trails, calling Meredith's name. The community of Dahlonega, where Meredith was a beloved figure, rallied, their hope tempered by a growing dread. The investigation took a critical turn on January 5th when a hiker reported a suspicious man near Vogel State Park, 10 miles from Blood Mountain. He was Gary Hilton, spotted with a young woman's backpack and behaving erratically. Police tracked him to a gas station where he was cleaning out his van, a tarp stained with blood in the back. Under questioning, Hilton was cagey, claiming he'd found the backpack discarded, but the evidence was mounting. Meredith's ATM card was traced to withdrawals in nearby towns, and surveillance footage showed Hilton at the machines, his face unmistakable. On January 7, under pressure, he cracked, leading police to Meredith's body in a remote part of the forest. The sight broke the hearts of those who found her, her vibrant spirit reduced to a still form, her dreams stolen by a monster. Hilton's confession was cold, clinical. He described the abduction, the extortion, the murder, as if recounting a routine. But his words revealed a chilling truth. Meredith wasn't his first victim. Investigators began connecting dots to other cases, missing hikers, unsolved murders across Florida, North Carolina, and beyond. Hilton, a drifter for decades, had left a trail of bodies, his crimes hidden by his transient life. In Florida, Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse, had been found decapitated in 2007, her death bearing Hilton's hallmarks. In North Carolina, John and Irene Bryant, an elderly couple, vanished in 2007. John's body was later found. Irene's never recovered. Hilton's reach was vast, his cruelty boundless. The trial for Meredith's murder began in 2011. A 3-year delay as prosecutors built an airtight case. In Gwinnett County, Georgia, the courtroom was a crucible of grief and rage. Meredith's family, led by her parents, Susan and David, sat stoic, their pain etched in every line. Prosecutors painted Hilton as a predator without remorse, a man who hunted for sport. Physical evidence was overwhelming. Meredith's blood in his van, her belongings in his possession, the ATM footage tying him to her final days. Witnesses, including hikers who'd encountered Hilton's unsettling presence, added weight to the case. His confession, recorded on tape, was played for the jury, its flat tone chilling the room. Hilton's defense was a desperate scramble. His court-appointed lawyers argued he was a product of a broken life. Abuse, homelessness, a mind warped by years on the fringes. They claimed the murder wasn't planned, a spontaneous act driven by desperation for money. But the jury saw through the facade. Hilton's history, far from mitigating his guilt, painted a portrait of a serial killer who thrived on control. After a brief deliberation, they found him guilty of first-degree murder on February 22, 2011. In a plea deal to avoid the death penalty in Georgia, Hilton pleaded guilty, accepting a life sentence without parole. But his story wasn't over. In Florida, Hilton faced trial for Cheryl Dunlap's murder. The evidence was less direct, no confession, no body, but the pattern was unmistakable. Her ATM card, used by Hilton, and forensic traces in his van sealed his fate. In 2012, he was sentenced to death, a punishment that carried the weight of multiple lives lost. North Carolina charged him with the Bryant's murders, adding another life sentence. Hilton, now a frail figure in shackles, showed no remorse, his eyes darting as if still searching for an escape. From his cell, he taunted investigators, hinting at other victims, bodies still hidden in the forests he once prowled. Meredith's death left a void in Dahlonega. Her friends remembered her as a light, quick to laugh, fierce in her love for adventure. Her parents channeled their grief into advocacy, founding the Meredith Hope Emerson Foundation to promote hiker safety. The foundation funded trail signs, emergency beacons, and education programs, ensuring Meredith's legacy saved lives. Blood Mountain, once a place of joy, became a somber reminder. Hikers now carried pepper spray, traveled in groups, their trust in the wilderness shaken. The Appalachian Trail, a ribbon of freedom, bore the stain of Hilton's crimes, its solitude now tinged with caution. The investigation into Hilton's past continued, a grim scavenger hunt for answers. Police suspected he was linked to at least a dozen disappearances, but evidence was scarce. His transient life left few traces. In interviews, he played games, offering vague clues, then retracting them, a puppeteer even in chains. His van, impounded and dissected, held secrets, bloodstains from multiple victims, a knife with microscopic flesh traces, a journal with cryptic notes. Yet many cases remained open, families left with questions no confession could answer. Hilton, sentenced to die, seemed to relish the mystery, a final act of control. Georgia's response was swift but sobering. The GBI implemented new protocols for missing persons cases, prioritizing rapid response in wilderness areas. Trailheads gained cameras, rangers increased patrols, and communities along the Appalachian Trail formed safety networks. Meredith's story, covered in national media, sparked a broader conversation about the dangers of solo hiking, especially for women. Advocacy groups pushed for better training for park rangers, arguing that predators like Hilton exploited the gaps in oversight. The forest, once a sanctuary, was now a battleground where vigilance was the price of peace. Hilton's life behind bars was a slow fade. On Florida's death row, he was a ghost, his health deteriorating as appeals dragged on. In 2023, at 76, he died of natural causes, cheating the executioner's needle. His death brought no closure. Too many families still waited for bodies for truths he took to the grave. For Meredith's loved ones, it was a hollow end, a man who stole so much, slipping away without reckoning. Her foundation, though, grew stronger, a testament to her spirit. Schools taught her story, hikers carried her name, and the trails she loved became safer because of her. As the rain whispers outside, picture Meredith Emerson on Blood Mountain, her laughter echoing through the trees. Imagine Ella, tethered and helpless, her barks fading into the wind. See Gary Hilton, a shadow moving through the forest, his eyes glinting with hunger. This story isn't just about a murder. It's about a light extinguished, a community awakened, and a predator who thought he could outrun the past. Was Hilton a monster born or made? How many others fell to his hands, their names lost to the earth? And what of Meredith, whose love for the wild became her undoing? Did justice honor her or merely bury her pain? The night is long and more tales await. Stories of greed, desperation, and justice warped by human hands. From a schoolboy's violent outburst to a housewife's fight for truth, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness reveals what lies beneath the surface. Story 6, the Antietam Middle Senior High School attack. In the quiet heart of Lower Ossass Township, Pennsylvania, where rolling hills and small-town charm cradle a close-knit community, a single morning in January 2008 shattered the illusion of safety. Antietam Middle Senior High School, a place of learning and laughter, became a battlefield when a 13-year-old boy unleashed a storm of violence that no one saw coming. His name was Ian Cimino, a quiet soul whose inner turmoil erupted in a horrifying act that left the town reeling. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the hushed hallways of Antietam, where innocence collided with rage and a community's search for answers uncovered wounds deeper than the scars left behind. This is a story of pain, redemption, and the fragile line between a cry for help and a tragedy that could not be undone. Antietam Meadows Senior High School was a cornerstone of Lower Alsace, a modest brick building where generations of students carved their futures. On January 8, 2008, the school day began like any other. Locker slamming, voices echoing, the hum of adolescence filling the air. Ian Cimino, an 8th grader with a slight frame and downcast eyes, blended into the crowd. To his teachers, he was reserved, a boy who kept to himself but showed no overt signs of trouble. To his classmates, he was an enigma, often alone, his thoughts hidden behind a quiet demeanor. But beneath the surface, Ian was drowning, his heart heavy with burdens no child should bear. Ian's life was a patchwork of struggles. Raising a working-class family, he faced challenges that went unnoticed by those around him. His mother, a single parent juggling multiple jobs, loved him fiercely but was stretched thin, her attention fractured by the demands of survival. At school, Ian was a target, bullied for his small stature, his worn clothes, his inability to fit in, whispers in the hallways, shoves in the cafeteria, cruel notes slipped into his locker. These were the daily tolls of his existence. Friends were few and trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Psychiatric evaluations, conducted later, would reveal untreated depression and anxiety, conditions that festered in silence, their signs mistaken for teenage moodiness. The morning of the attack began unremarkably. Ian arrived at school, his backpack heavier than usual. Inside, concealed among notebooks, was a kitchen knife and a blowtorch, items he'd taken from home with a purpose he'd kept secret. A note left on his kitchen table for his mother offered a glimpse into his mind. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I love you. Goodbye." The words, scrawled in a child's unsteady hand, were a farewell, a signal of intent that no one saw until it was too late. At 10:22 a.m., as students shuffled between classes, Ian's plan unfolded, a spark igniting a fire that would sear Antietam's soul. The attack began in a second-floor hallway, a narrow corridor lined with lockers. Ian, his face pale but resolute, approached the three classmates, 2 boys and a girl, all 14, whose names would later be shielded by juvenile privacy laws. They were part of the crowd that had taunted him, their laughter a constant echo in his mind. Without warning, Ian drew the knife, its blade glinting under the fluorescent lights. The first boy, caught off guard, took a slash to his arm, blood blooming on his sleeve as he stumbled back. The girl screamed, dodging a wild swing that grazed her shoulder. The second boy, trying to intervene, was cut across his hand, the pain sharp and sudden. Chaos erupted, students scattering, their shouts filling the air like shattered glass. Ian's rage didn't stop with the knife. He pulled the blowtorch from his bag, igniting it with a hiss that froze those nearby. The flame, small but menacing, danced in his hand as he backed his victims against a wall, his eyes wild with a mix of fear and fury. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking, a child's plea twisted by desperation. Teachers, alerted by the commotion, rushed toward the scene. Their training no match for the surreal horror unfolding. For a fleeting moment, Ian held the hallway hostage, the blowtorch a barrier between him and the world he felt had betrayed him. The standoff lasted mere minutes, but to those trapped in the corridor, it felt like an eternity. Mr. Daniel Weaver, a history teacher with a calm demeanor, took charge. Risking his own safety, he approached Ian, his voice steady, his hands raised. "Ian, you don't want to do this," he said, each word a lifeline. "Put it down. Let's talk." Other staff members formed a loose circle, their presence a silent plea for de-escalation. Ian's resolve wavered, the blowtorch trembling in his grip. Tears streaked his face, his breath ragged. At 10:29 a.m., he dropped the weapon, the flame extinguishing as he sank to his knees. A boy, broken by his own actions. Police swarmed the school, their sirens a jarring contrast to the morning's quiet. Ian was handcuffed and led away, his small frame swallowed by the weight of his choices. The injured students were rushed to Reading Hospital, their wounds serious but not life-threatening. Stitches closed their cuts, but the emotional scars would linger, their trust in the safety of school shattered. Parents flooded the campus, their faces etched with panic, their arms wrapping around children who'd seen too much. Antietam locked down, a fortress against a threat that had come from within. The investigation began immediately, a delicate dance given Ian's age and the gravity of his actions. Detectives searched his home, finding the note to his mother, its words a chilling prelude to the attack. Interviews with classmates revealed the bullying Ian endured, taunts about his appearance, his family's struggles, his isolation. Teachers, reflecting on missed signs, recalled Ian's recent withdrawal, his grades slipping, his silence growing heavier. A school counselor admitted she'd met with him once, but his reticence made it hard to probe deeper. The blowtorch, an unusual choice, was traced to a family garage, a tool Ian had repurposed in his planning. Ian's motives were a tangle of pain and desperation. The note suggested premeditation, a plan born from despair rather than malice. Psychiatric evaluations painted a portrait of a boy overwhelmed, depression, anxiety, and a sense of hopelessness compounded by relentless bullying. He wasn't a hardened criminal, but a child who saw no way out. The targets, classmates who tormented him, were symbols of a world he felt had rejected him. Yet, in his surrender, there was a flicker of remorse, a sign that the boy who loved his mother still lived beneath the rage. The legal proceedings were a tightrope walk. Charged as a juvenile with aggravated assault, recklessly endangering others in weapons offenses, Ian faced a system designed to balance accountability with rehabilitation. Prosecutors argued he posed a danger, his actions calculated and violent. The knife, the blowtorch, the note, all pointed to intent, they said. A plan that could have been far deadlier. The defense countered with context. Ian was a victim, too, of bullying, neglect, and untreated mental illness. This was a cry for help, his lawyer pleaded, from a boy who felt he had no one. The court, mindful of his age, leaned toward mercy. In June 2008, Ian was adjudicated delinquent, the juvenile equivalent of a guilty verdict. Rather than prison, he was sent to a residential treatment facility, a place where therapy and structure aimed to rebuild what had broken. His sentence included intensive counseling, anger management, and education, with a focus on addressing the root causes of his outbursts. The judge, in her ruling, spoke of potential. Ian Chimeno is not defined by this moment. He is a child, and children can change. His mother, devastated but resolute, visited weekly, her love a constant in a world turned upside down. Antietam's response was swift and sweeping. The school district, shaken by the breach in its sanctuary, overhauled security. Metal detectors were installed at entrances, clear backpacks mandated, and law enforcement officers became a daily presence. Mental health resources expanded. Counselors were hired, peer support groups formed, and anti-bullying programs rolled out with urgency. Teachers received training to spot signs of distress, their eyes now sharper for the quiet ones like Ian. The district superintendent, addressing a packed town hall, vowed this will not happen again. But promises, as the community knew, were only as strong as the actions behind them. Lower Alcide Township rallied, its resilience a testament to its spirit. Community forums sprang up, parents and educators grappling with how to protect their children. Workshops taught warning signs of mental health struggles, urging open communication. Students, once divided by cliques, formed alliances, their shared trauma a bridge to empathy. The injured trio, healed in body but haunted in mind, returned to school, their presence a quiet act of courage. Their families, supported by counseling, spoke of forgiveness, though the path was long. Antietam, scarred but unbroken, became a beacon of change, a small town determined to learn from its pain. The broader impact rippled beyond Pennsylvania. Ian's case joined a growing chorus of school violence incidents, each one a plea for reform. National debates flared. How do we protect students from external threats and from themselves? Mental health funding, long neglected, became a rallying cry, with advocates pointing to Ian as proof of what happens when cries go unheard. Anti-bullying laws gained traction, schools nationwide adopting zero-tolerance policies. The blowtorch, an odd but terrifying weapon, sparked discussions about access to tools in troubled homes, though no easy answers emerged. Ian's journey in treatment was a slow climb. Reports from the facility described a boy wrestling with guilt, his therapy sessions peeling back layers of hurt. He wrote letters to his victims, their words private but their intent clear. Remorse. His mother, a pillar through it all, spoke of progress, small steps, like Ian's first smile in months. Released at 18, he returned to a world changed by his actions, his future uncertain but not without hope. Lower Alsace welcomed him quietly, some with forgiveness, others with caution. His story, like his note, was a whisper of what might have been. The scars of that day remain. Antietam's hallways, now fortified, carry echoes of the panic, the screams, the moment a boy became a stranger. The injured students, now adults, live with memories that flare in quiet moments. The community, stronger for its unity, knows the fragility of peace. Ian Chimeno, wherever he is, carries the weight of a choice made at 13. A moment that defined him but didn't destroy him. Was he a villain or a victim of a world that failed to see his pain? Did justice heal or merely contain? And what of the children still walking those halls? Their struggles hidden, their voices unheard. As the rain falls tonight, picture Ian standing in that hallway, the knife in his hand, the blowtorch's flame a mirror to his rage. Imagine the teachers, their courage, a shield against chaos, and the students, their lives forever altered by a moment's violence. This story is a reminder of the fragility of youth, the power of community, and the shadows that grow when no one listens. The past holds its secrets close, but Antietam's lesson is clear. To save a child, you must first see them. The night stretches on and more tales await. Stories of betrayal, murder, and justice twisted by human hands. From a robbery turned deadly to a lawyer's fall from grace, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness reveals truths too heavy to bury. Story 7, the Geylang murder of Chia Ruan. In the neon-drenched alleys of Singapore's Geylang district, where shadows dance with desire and danger lurks behind every corner, A single night in February 2008 turned a bustling street into a crime scene. Chia Ruan, a 44-year-old construction worker from China, was a man chasing a better life, his calloused hands a testament to years of toil. But on February 17, his dreams were shattered by a brutal act of greed, his life stolen in a robbery gone wrong. The perpetrators, Ko Jae-bing and Jae-ling Anak Kuat, two Malaysian nationals, left a trail of blood that would spark a legal saga and a nation's reckoning with justice. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the humid, flickering streets of Gaylong, where a single blow ignited a firestorm of consequences, and the scales of justice tipped toward an unforgiving end. This is a story of desperation, violence, and the weight of a life taken too soon. Geylang is Singapore's underbelly, a district where legality and vice coexist in an easy balance. By day, it's a hub of food stalls and markets. By night, it transforms into a maze of brothels, bars, and fleeting encounters. For migrant workers like Chia Ruan, Geylang offered a rare escape, a place to unwind after grueling shifts, to share a drink with friends, to feel human again. Chia, a father of two, had come to Singapore seeking work, his wages sent home to a family dreaming of a better future. On that fateful Sunday evening, he walked through Gaylong with Wu Jun, a fellow worker, their laughter cutting through the humid air. They were unaware that two predators were watching, their eyes glinting with intent. Ko Jae-bing, 24, and Giling Akuat, 21, were no strangers to the streets. Both from Sarawak, Malaysia, they had drifted to Singapore in search of quick money, their lives marked by petty crime and fleeting jobs. Ko was the leader, a man whose charm masked a volatile temper. Giling, quieter but loyal, followed his lead, their bond forged in shared hardship. On February 17, they were broke, restless, and hunting for a target. Armed with a tree branch and a belt, they roamed Geylang, their plan simple: rob someone vulnerable, take the cash, and disappear into the night. Chia Ruan, with his worn jacket and unassuming stride, was their mark. The attack came at 10:37 p.m. in a dimly lit alley off Lorong 23. Chia and Wu, heading to a late-night eatery, were ambushed without warning. Ko struck first, swinging the tree branch with savage force, aiming for Chia's head. The blow landed with a sickening crack, sending Chia to the ground, blood seeping from his skull. Wu, stunned, tried to flee, but Giling grabbed him, the belt looping around his neck in a chokehold. Chia, dazed but fighting, struggled to rise, only to face Ko's relentless assault. The branch came down again, once, twice, 14 times in total. Each strike, a thunderclap of violence. Wu, gasping under Gayling's grip, broke free and ran, his shouts for help lost in the alley's din. By the time the attack ended, Chia lay motionless, his skull shattered, his wallet and phone gone. Ko and Giling fled, their hands stained with blood, their loot meager, a few dollars and a cheap phone, hardly worth a life. Passers-by, drawn by the commotion, found Chia's body, their calls to police piercing the night. Paramedics arrived at 10:52 p.m., but the damage was catastrophic. Chia was rushed to Tan Tock Seng Hospital, where he clung to life for 6 days, his brain hemorrhaging, his body failing. On February 23, 2008, he was pronounced dead. His family in China left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. Singapore's police moved with precision. Geylang, a hotspot for crime, was under constant watch, its cameras capturing fragments of the night. Footage showed two men matching Ko and Gilling's descriptions, fleeing the alley, their faces fleeting but distinct. Wu Jun, shaken but cooperative, gave a detailed account, his memory sharp despite the trauma. He identified Ko as the primary attacker, the man whose branch had crushed Chia's life. Gillian, he said, was the accomplice, his role secondary but undeniable. By February 20, both men were in custody, tracked to a cheap hostel where they'd hidden, their bravado crumbling under interrogation. The investigation peeled back the layers of a senseless crime. Ko and Gilling confessed, their stories aligning, but laced with deflection. Ko admitted to the robbery, claiming the violence got out of hand, as if 14 blows could be an accident. Gilling described himself as a bystander, holding Wu but not striking Chia, his hands clean of blood. Forensic evidence told a different tale. Chia's injuries? 14 skull fractures, each a testament to Ko's ferocity. Showed intent to kill, not just rob. The tree branch, recovered from a dumpster, bore traces of Chia's blood and Ko's fingerprints. The belt, found in Gilling's bag, matched marks on Wu's neck. The case was airtight, but its implications were far-reaching. Ko and Gilling were charged with murder under Section 300 of Singapore's Penal Code, a crime carrying the mandatory death penalty. The charge of robbery with hurt was added, reflecting the theft that sparked the violence. Singapore's legal system, known for its rigor, left little room for leniency, especially in cases of such brutality. The trial, held in 2010, was a grim affair, the courtroom heavy with the weight of Chia's loss. Chia's family, unable to attend, sent a statement read aloud. "He was our hope, our strength. His death has broken us." The words hung in the air, a reminder of the human cost beyond the legal arguments. Prosecutors built a relentless case. Ko Jiabing, they argued, was no impulsive thief but a predator whose violence defined him. The 14 blows, each delivered with force, showed a depraved disregard for human life, the lead prosecutor said, his voice steady. Medical experts testified to Chia's injuries. Fractures so severe they suggested intent to destroy, not just disable. Wu's testimony was pivotal, his voice trembling as he recounted the attack. Ko's eyes like a demon's as the branch fell. Gilling's role, though less violent, was no less culpable, the prosecution claimed. By restraining Wu, he ensured Chia's isolation, a partner in the crime's execution. Ko's defense was a plea for context. His lawyer painted him as a product of poverty, a young man from a broken home in Sarawak, where opportunities were scarce. The robbery, they argued, was a desperate act. The violence, a panicked response when Chia fought back. Ko took the stand, his voice low, claiming he didn't mean to kill. But his words rang hollow against the evidence. His lack of remorse stark in his flat gaze. Guiling's defense leaned on his secondary role, portraying him as a follower swept up in Ko's chaos. "I didn't touch the victim," Guiling said, his eyes downcast. Yet his presence, his failure to stop Ko, tied him to the crime. The trial's outcome was almost inevitable. On July 3rd, 2010, the High Court found both men guilty of murder. The sentence was stark: death by hanging. The noose, a symbol of Singapore's unforgiving stance on violent crime. The courtroom was silent as the verdict landed. Ko's face unreadable, Gilling's shoulders slumping. Chia's family, informed across borders, found no solace in the ruling, only a hollow sense of closure. But the case was far from over. Singapore's legal system, while rigid, was evolving, and the Geylang murder would become a lightning rod for debates that reached far beyond the alley where Chia fell. In 2011, Gilling's conviction was revisited. His lawyers appealed, arguing his role didn't meet the threshold for murder. The Court of Appeal agreed, reducing his charge to robbery with hurt, a crime carrying imprisonment and cane. Sentenced to 18 years and 6 months, plus 12 strokes of the cane, Gilling escaped the gallows, his lesser involvement acknowledged. Ko's fate, however, was sealed, or so it seemed. His appeal in 2011 failed, the court unmoved by claims of spontaneity. The 14 blows they ruled showed an intention to cause death, the legal standard for murder. Ko was returned to death row, his execution looming. Singapore's death penalty, a cornerstone of its justice system, faced scrutiny as Ko's case unfolded. In 2012, legal reforms introduced judicial discretion in murder cases, allowing life imprisonment with caning as an alternative to death for defendants who didn't intend to kill. Ko's lawyers seized the chance, arguing his crime, while brutal, was a robbery gone wrong, not a premeditated murder. In 2013, the High Court commuted his sentence to life imprisonment and 24 strokes of the cane, a rare reprieve in a system known for finality. Ko, now 29, faced a lifetime behind bars, the cane scars a permanent reminder of his debt. But the reprieve was short-lived. Prosecutors, backed by public outcry, appealed the decision, arguing Ko's violence warranted the ultimate punishment. The Court of Appeal, in a landmark 2015 ruling, reinstated the death penalty, citing the extreme brutality of the attack. The 14 fractures, they said, were not the work of a man who merely lost control, but of one who chose to destroy. Carroll's legal team fought on, their appeals reaching the United Nations, where human rights groups decried Singapore's use of capital punishment. Yet Singapore stood firm, its government defending the death penalty as a deterrent, a shield against chaos in a city built on order. On May 20, 2016, Ko Jiabing's time ran out. At Changi Prison in a sterile chamber, he was led to the gallows. His final moments, witnessed only by officials, were private, his last words unrecorded. At 3:30 p.m., the trapdoor fell and Ko was gone, his life extinguished as swiftly as Chia's had been. Gaelong by then had moved on, its alley still pulsing with life and vice. Chia's family in a distant village in China mourned quietly, their breadwinner a memory. Wu Jun, scarred by the night, returned to work, his silence a shield against the past. The case left a lasting mark on Singapore. Ko's execution, one of the last under the old murder laws, fueled debates about justice and mercy. Supporters of the death penalty pointed to Chia's brutal end, arguing that such crimes demanded retribution. Critics, including Amnesty International, called Ko's hanging a step backward, a refusal to embrace rehabilitation over vengeance. The 2012 reforms, while progressive, were applied unevenly, leaving questions about fairness. Why did Gilling live while Ko died? Was the difference in their roles enough to justify such divergent fates? Gilang itself became a focal point. The district's reputation as a crime magnet prompted police to tighten patrols, install more cameras, and crack down on illegal activities. Migrant workers like Chia gained new protections. Community centers, hotlines, and outreach programs aimed at keeping them safe. Yet the alley where Chia fell remains, a narrow scar in the city's heart, its story whispered by those who passed. Singapore, ever vigilant, learnt that even its order could be pierced by a moment's violence, a lesson written in blood. Ko Jobbing's story is a mirror to human choices. Was he a monster driven by greed, or a man shaped by a life with no margins? Did justice serve Chia Ruan, or merely deepen the cycle of loss? And what of Gilang, a place where dreams and dangers collide? Can it ever be more than a stage for tragedy? As the rain falls tonight, picture Chia walking that alley, his steps heavy with hope, unaware of the shadow closing in, a magico, the branch in his hand, his heart racing with a choice he couldn't unmake. Their lives, briefly intertwined, left a legacy that lingers, a reminder that every blow carries a cost. The night stretches on and more tales await, stories of corruption, betrayal, and justice warped by human hands. From a lawyer's scandal to a financier's fraud, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness unveils truths too heavy to silence. Story 8. Richard Scruggs' judicial bribery scandal. In the polished corridors of Mississippi's legal world, where power is measured in influence and wealth, one man stood above the rest. Richard Scruggs, a titan of the courtroom, was a name synonymous with victory. His lawsuits against tobacco giants and insurance companies had earned him billions and a reputation as a champion of the underdog. But in March 2008, the empire he built crumbled under the weight of a single fateful choice. A bribe offered to a judge. A betrayal that exposed the rot beneath his gilded success. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the smoky backrooms of Oxford, Mississippi, where ambition turned to corruption, and a legal legend fell from grace in a scandal that shook the foundations of justice. This is the story of greed, hubris, and the price of crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Richard Scruggs, known as Dickie to friends and foes alike, was no ordinary lawyer. By 2008, at 61, he was a legend in legal circles, his name etched in the annals of American litigation. Born in Brookhaven, Mississippi, Scruggs had climbed from modest roots to unimaginable wealth, his charisma and cunning making him a force in the courtroom. His biggest triumph came in the 990s, when he led a coalition of attorneys against big tobacco, securing a $246 billion 0-cent settlement that changed the industry forever. Later, he took on insurance companies in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, fighting for homeowners' denied claims, earning both admiration and enemies. His Gulf Coast mansion, private jet, and political connections painted a picture of a man untouchable, a king in a state where law and power intertwined. But beneath the polished exterior, Scruggs was a man driven by more than justice. Colleagues described him as relentless, a strategist who thrived on winning no matter the cost. His wealth, while vast, came with strings: rival lawyers, resentful insurers, and a constant need to stay ahead. By 2007, a new battle loomed, one that would test his empire. A legal fee dispute with another attorney, John Jones, over Katrina cases, threatened to siphon millions from Scruggs' firm. The case landed before Circuit Judge Henry Lackey, a respected figure in Oxford known for his integrity. It was a routine matter, or so it seemed. Until Scruggs made a choice that would unravel everything, the scandal began with a whisper, a quiet approach that betrayed Scruggs' confidence in his own invincibility. In early 2007, he enlisted Timothy Balducci, a young lawyer in his orbit, to deliver a message to Judge Lackey. Balducci, eager to prove his loyalty, was the perfect messenger, a man with ties to Scruggs' inner circle and a willingness to bend rules. The offer was simple but staggering: $440,000, 0 cents in cash to ensure a favorable ruling in the fee dispute. Scruggs, through Balducci, believed Lackey could be swayed, a miscalculation born of arrogance. But Lackey, a man of principle, saw the offer for what it was, a poison that threatened the heart of justice. Instead of accepting, Lackey acted swiftly. He contacted the FBI, his outrage tempered by a resolve to expose the corruption. The Bureau, sensing a high-profile target, launched a sting operation, codenamed Operation Integrity. Lackey became their linchpin, agreeing to wear a wire and play along with Balducci's overtures. Over weeks, recorded conversations captured the plot's details, meetings in Oxford coffee shops, coded language about considerations for the judge, and promises of cash delivered in unmarked envelopes. Balducci, unaware of the trap, implicated Scruggs and his son Zach, a lawyer in the family firm. Each word, preserved on tape, was a nail in their coffin. The sting reached its climax in September 2007, when Balducci delivered $40,000, 0 cents, to Lackey's chambers, the first installment of the bribe. FBI agents monitoring every move watched as the money changed hands, their case now ironclad. On November 1, 2007, the trap snapped shut. Scruggs, Balducci, Zach, and 2 associates, Sidney Backstrom and Stephen Patterson, were arrested. Their names splashed across headlines as the nation reeled. The man who'd toppled tobacco giants was now a felon, his empire exposed as a house of cards built on hubris. Mississippi, a state proud of its legal heritage, watched in stunned silence as one of its own fell. The investigation peeled back layers of a scandal that went beyond a single bribe. Scruggs' firm, a powerhouse in Oxford, operated in a world where influence was currency. Former colleagues, speaking under anonymity, described a culture of cutting corners, payoffs to witnesses, pressure on clients, and a belief that rules were for lesser men. The fee dispute with Jones, while minor compared to Scruggs' past battles, had become a point of pride, a fight he couldn't afford to lose. The bribe, investigators believed, wasn't a one-off, but a glimpse into a pattern, a willingness to bend justice when the stakes were high. Scruggs' arrest was a media firestorm. The New York Times called him a fallen titan, while local papers mourned the betrayal of a hometown hero. His Gulf Coast community, where he'd fought for Katrina victims, grappled with the paradox. A man who'd done good, undone by greed. Political allies, including Mississippi's powerful senators, distanced themselves, their silence deafening. Scruggs, once a guest at White House dinners, was now a pariah, his jet grounded, his mansion a hollow shell. The legal world, too, felt the shockwaves. How could a man so brilliant fall so far? The trial, set for March 2008, was a spectacle in Oxford's federal courthouse. Scruggs, facing charges of conspiracy, bribery, and mail fraud, stood to lose everything: his freedom, his fortune, his legacy. Prosecutors, armed with Lackey's tapes, painted a damning picture. A lawyer who believed he was above the law, a mastermind who used Balducci as a pawn. The recordings, played for the jury, were devastating. Balducci's voice, casual and confident, detailing the bribe. Scruggs' approval implicit in every word. Lackey, testifying with quiet resolve, recounted the moment he was approached. His disgust palpable. "I swore an oath," he said, "and no money could break it." Now, Scruggs' defense was a desperate bid for redemption. His lawyers, led by John Kecker, argued he was entrapped, a victim of Balducci's overzealous ambition. Scruggs, they claimed, never directly ordered the bribe, his involvement limited to vague approvals. They painted him as a man under pressure, his empire besieged by rivals and financial strain. Character witnesses, clients, friends, even a pastor spoke of his generosity, his fight for the little guy. But the jury, a mix of Oxford locals and outsiders, saw through the spin. The tapes were too clear, the intent too blatant. Scruggs' wealth, once a shield, now seemed a motive. Greed, Not necessity drove his choice. Balducci, hoping for leniency, turned state's witness, his testimony a blow to Scruggs' defense. He described meetings at Scruggs' office where the bribe was planned with chilling precision. Zach, he said, was complicit, aware of the scheme and eager to protect the firm. Backstrom and Patterson, lesser players, followed suit, their loyalty crumbling under the threat of prison. The conspiracy, Balducci admitted, was a group effort, but Scruggs was the architect, his authority unquestioned. The revelations painted a portrait of a firm corrupted by its own success, where winning justified any means. On March 14, 2008, Scruggs made a stunning move. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to bribe a judge, accepting a deal to avoid a trial that could have added years to his sentence. Zach, Backstrom, and Patterson followed, their pleas a cascade of surrender. Balducci, already cooperating, faced a lighter sentence. The courtroom, packed with reporters, was silent as Scruggs stood, his voice steady but hollow. "I accept responsibility," he said, the words a faint echo of the man who'd once commanded juries. The plea spared him the death penalty's shadow, but not the fall. His law license was revoked, his reputation in ruins. Sentencing came in June 2008, a moment of reckoning. Scruggs, dressed in a plain suit, faced Judge Neil Biggers, a no-nonsense jurist unmoved by his former stature. Prosecutors pushed for a harsh penalty, arguing Scruggs' crime struck at the heart of justice. He didn't just break the law, they said, he tried to buy it. The defense pleaded for mercy, citing Scruggs' contributions, his tobacco fight, his Katrina work, his philanthropy. The Biggers, weighing both sides, delivered a sentence of 5 years in federal prison, a $250,000 0-cents fine, and 3 years probation. Zach received 14 months, Balducci 2 years, Backstrom and Patterson lesser terms. The gavel fell, and Scruggs' empire was dust. Prison was a stark contrast to Scruggs' former life. At FCI Morgantown, a low-security facility, he traded his mansion for a cell, his jet for a bunk. Inmates unaware of his past treated him as just another number. He taught legal classes to fellow prisoners, a faint echo of his courtroom days. But the spark was gone. Outside, his family struggled. His wife Diane faced public scrutiny, their wealth eroded by legal fees. The legal community, once his domain, moved on, his name a cautionary tale whispered in law schools. Released in 2012, Scruggs returned to a quieter life, his health frail, his legacy a shadow. The scandal's impact rippled through Mississippi and beyond. The state's legal system, long plagued by whispers of cronyism, faced a reckoning. Judicial ethics became a rallying cry, with new training and oversight to prevent corruption. The Mississippi Bar Association, stung by Scruggs' fall, pushed for stricter rules on attorney conduct, emphasizing integrity over ambition. Nationally, the case fueled debates about the influence of money in law. How could a man like Scruggs, so rich, risk it all for $440,000, 0 cents? The answer, experts suggested, was hubris, a belief that rules didn't apply to giants. Judge Lackey emerged as an unsung hero, his courage a beacon in a tarnished system. He retired in 2008, his legacy defined by the sting that toppled Scruggs. The FBI, lauded for its precision, used the case as a model for rooting out judicial corruption, their methods studied in training programs. John Jones, the lawyer whose dispute sparked the scandal, settled his claim quietly, his victory overshadowed by the broader betrayal. Mississippi citizens grappling with the fallout demanded transparency, their trust in the courts shaken but not broken. Keith Scruggs' story is a mirror to the human soul. Was he a hero who lost his way, or a man whose mask of justice hid a core of greed? Did his good deeds, billions for tobacco victims, homes rebuilt after Katrina, outweigh his sin or merely disguise it? And what of the system that let him rise, a world where money and power blur the line between right and wrong? As the rain falls tonight, picture Scruggs in his office, the bribe a whispered plan, his empire still gleaming. Imagine Lackey, the judge who said no, his pen signing the end of a legend. Their choices, like ripples on a dark pond, remind us that even giants fall when they reach too far. Story 9, Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. In the glittering towers of Wall Street, where fortunes are made and dreams are sold, one man wove a lie so vast it swallowed billions. Bernard Madoff, a financier with a silver tongue and a smile that disarmed the wary, was a titan of finance, trusted by the elite and revered by the masses. But in 2009, his empire of wealth revealed itself as a mirage, a $65 billion, 0 cents Ponzi scheme, the largest in history, that left lives in ruins and a nation questioning the cost of greed. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the sleek offices of Manhattan, where numbers hit a monstrous truth and a single confession unraveled decades of deception. It's the story of betrayal, illusion, and the wreckage left when trust is stolen by a man who played God with money. Not Madoff was no ordinary broker. By 2008, at 70, he was a legend, his name synonymous with steady profits and unshakable reliability. Born in Queens, New York, to a modest Jewish family, Madoff had built Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities from a scrappy startup in 1960 to a powerhouse on Wall Street. His firm was a pioneer, using early computers to streamline trading, earning him respect as an innovator. But it was his investment advisory business, a secretive sideline, that made him a myth. Clients, hedge funds, charities, Hollywood stars, retirees handed over billions, lured by promises of consistent 10-12% annual returns, rain or shine. To the world, Madoff was a wizard, a man who defied the market's chaos with uncanny precision. The truth, hidden for decades, was far darker. Madoff's returns were fiction, his wealth a house of cards built on a Ponzi scheme. He took money from new investors to pay profits to earlier ones, creating the illusion of success while siphoning funds for himself. His firm produced no real trades, no investments, just fabricated statements, meticulously crafted to fool even the savviest clients. Madoff's charm was his shield, his reputation, his armor. He hobnobbed with regulators, served on NASDAQ's board, and cultivated an air of exclusivity. Clients begged to invest, their trust blind. For years, the scheme grew, a balloon of lies swelling with each new dollar. The cracks began to show in the early 2000s, though few noticed. Harry Markopoulos, a financial analyst, sounded alarms as early as 1999, warning the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, that Madoff's numbers were mathematically impossible. His reports, detailed and urgent, were ignored, dismissed as the ravings of a rival. The SEC, underfunded and outmaneuvered, conducted cursory audits of Madoff's firm, finding nothing amiss. Madoff, ever the showman, welcomed investigators with coffee and smiles. His books cooked to perfection. Meanwhile, his client list grew. Palm Beach tycoons, European banks, Jewish charities like the Elie Wiesel Foundation, all drawn into the web. Their faith in Madoff, unwavering. By 2008, the global financial crisis was a storm no one could outrun. Markets crashed, banks teetered, and investors clamored for cash. Madoff's clients, spooked by the chaos, began withdrawing funds. Their demands, a tide he couldn't stem. The scheme, dependent on new money to pay old promises, buckled under the pressure. In December 2008, Madoff faced $7 billion, 0 cents in redemption requests. His accounts holding a mere $300 million, 0 cents. The lie, sustained for at least 2 decades, was unraveling, and Madoff, for the first time, saw no way out. The Wizard of Wall Street was cornered, his magic spent. The end came not with the raid, but a confession. On December 10th, 2008, Madoff sat his sons, Mark and Andrew, down in his Manhattan penthouse. His voice, usually smooth, trembled as he admitted the truth. It's all one big lie. The firm, he said, was insolvent, the wealth a fiction. His sons, executives in the legitimate trading arm of the business, were stunned, their world collapsing in a single sentence. They urged him to turn himself in, but loyalty clashed with duty. The next day, December 11th, they contacted their lawyer, who alerted the FBI. Agents arrived at Madoff's apartment, their knock a death knell for his empire. "I'm done," Madoff said, his hands raised. The game, over. The arrest sent shockwaves through the financial world. Madoff, charged with securities fraud, money laundering, and perjury, faced a 150-year sentence. The scale of his crime, $65 billion, 0 cents in paper losses, $20 billion, 0 cents in actual cash, vanished, was staggering. A betrayal that touched every corner of society. Clients, from retirees to institutions, discovered their savings were gone, their futures erased. Charities folded, unable to function without funds Madoff had promised. Suicides followed, investors broken by loss took their lives, their despair a silent echo of Madoff's deceit. The Elie Wiesel Foundation, stripped of millions, struggled to rebuild, its mission tarnished by a man its founder had trusted. The investigation was a Herculean task. The FBI, SEC, and a court-appointed trustee, Irving Picard, combed through Madoff's records, a labyrinth of fake trades and forged documents. His firm's 17th floor, where the scheme operated, was a fortress of secrecy, staffed by loyalists who either knew or suspected the truth. Computers, rigged to generate false statements, churned out lies for years, their code a testament to Madoff's cunning. Bank accounts, from New York to the Caymans, held traces of siphoned funds, much of it spent on Madoff's lavish life. Yachts, homes, private jet. Recovering the money was a Sisyphean effort, with Picard clawing back billions through lawsuits against net winners who'd profited unwittingly. Madoff's trial, held in 2009, was less a contest than a requiem. On March 12, he pleaded guilty to 11 federal counts, his voice steady as he admitted, "I knew what I was doing was wrong." Prosecutors, led by Mark Litt, painted him as a sociopath, a man who preyed on trust with surgical precision. Victims, given a chance to speak, filled the courtroom with their pain. A widow who lost her home, a teacher whose pension vanished, a charity director whose mission was gutted. Their stories, raw and unrelenting, stripped Madoff of his mystique, revealing a hollow man driven by ego. His defense, limited by his plea, offered no excuses, only a plea for leniency that fell on deaf ears. Sentencing came on June 29, 2009, in a packed Manhattan courtroom. Judge Denny Chin, unmoved by Madoff's age or past, delivered a 150-year sentence, calling the scheme extraordinarily evil. The term, symbolic but unyielding, ensured Madoff would die in prison, his freedom as illusory as the wealth he'd promised. Victims cheered, though their applause was bittersweet. Justice couldn't restore what was lost. Madoff, expressionless, was led away, his pinstripe suit a relic of a life now confined to a cell at FCI Buhner, a medium-security prison in North Carolina. The fallout was a reckoning for Wall Street and beyond. The SEC, humiliated by its failure to catch Madoff, faced congressional hearings, its leadership grilled for ignoring Markopoulos's warnings. Reforms followed. Tighter audits, better whistleblower protections, and a push for transparency in hedge funds. Investors, burned by Madoff's charm, grew wary. Their trust in financial advisors fractured. The Ponzi scheme, once a rare anomaly, became a cautionary tale, its mechanics studied in business schools and boardrooms. Regulators, stung by criticism, vowed to tighten oversight, though skeptics wondered if the system could ever outsmart men like Madoff. Madoff's family bore the scandal's weight. Mark, unable to escape the shame, died by suicide in 2010, hanging himself in his Soho apartment on the scheme's second anniversary. Andrew, battling cancer, died in 2014, his health eroded by stress and public scorn. Ruth, Madoff's wife, was shunned, her socialite life reduced to a modest apartment, her complicity debated but never charged. Madoff's brother Peter, a firm executive, pleaded guilty to lesser charges, serving a 10-year sentence. The Madoff name, once a badge of prestige, became a curse, their legacy a synonym for betrayal. Victims, numbering in the thousands, faced a long road to recovery. Picard's recovery efforts, funded by lawsuits and asset seizures, returned over $14 billion. 0 cents by 2025. A fraction of the losses, but a lifeline for some. Charities, like the Wiesel Foundation, rebuilt slowly, their mission scarred but enduring. Retirees, forced back to work, carried the heaviest burden, their golden years stolen by a man they'd never met. Class action lawsuits against banks and feeders who funneled money to Madoff dragged on, their outcomes uncertain. The human toll, marriages dissolved, dreams deferred, lives ended, defied calculation, a ledger of pain no money could balance. Madoff, in prison, was a shadow of his former self. Inmates aware of his crimes shunned or targeted him, their disdain a daily reminder of his fall. He worked menial jobs, his days a grind of routine, his nights haunted by the empire he'd lost. In interviews, he deflected blame, claiming clients knew better than to trust him, his arrogance intact. Diagnosed with kidney disease, he sought compassionate release in 2020, citing terminal illness. Judge Chin denied it, citing the unprecedented harm Madoff caused. On April 14th, 2021, Madoff died in prison, his death closing a chapter but offering no closure to those he'd ruined. The scandal reshaped finance, but its lessons were hard-won. Whistleblowers like Markopoulos became heroes, their persistence a model for exposing fraud. The SEC, under new leadership, adopted data-driven audits, though critics argued the system remained vulnerable to charmers like Madoff. Investors learned to question too-good-to-be-true returns, their skepticism a shield against future schemes. Yet Ponzi schemes persisted, smaller but no less devastating proof that greed and trust are timeless lures. Madoff's ghost lingered in every market dip, a warning of what lies behind a perfect smile. Madoff's story is a mirror to human frailty. Was he a genius who turned to crime, or a conman who found the perfect stage? Did his victims, lured by steady profits, share the blame, or were they merely pawns in a game rigged from the start? And what of Wall Street? A world that crowned him king, only to feign shock when his crown was tin. As the rain falls tonight, picture Madoff in his office, numbers dancing on his screen, each one a lie that built an empire. Imagine the victims, their statements in hand, learning their wealth was smoke. Their loss, like ripples on a dark sea, reminds us that trust, once broken, leaves scars that never fade. But the night stretches on, and more tales await. Stories of murder, deception, and justice warped by human hands. From a digital killer's charm to a housewife's fight for truth, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness unveils truths too heavy to bear. Story 10, the Kanai Kojima Konkatsu Killer Case. In the quiet corners of Japan's digital world, where lonely hearts seek connection through the glow of a screen, a predator lurked behind a carefully crafted mask. Kana Kijima, a 34-year-old woman with a disarming smile and a web of lies, turned the promise of love into a deadly trap. Between 2007 and 2009, she preyed on vulnerable men, weaving romance into robbery and romance into murder. Her weapon wasn't a blade or a gun, but charm. A siren's call that led 3 men to their graves, their deaths disguised as suicides in a chilling game of deception. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the shadowed apartments of Tokyo, where Kojima spun her fatal web, and a nation awoke to the dangers hidden in the quest for love. This is a story of betrayal, greed, and a killer who thought she could outwit the truth. Japan in the late 2000s was a land of contrasts. Tradition clashed with technology, and the rise of konkatsu, marriage hunting, websites, offered a modern answer to age-old loneliness. These platforms like Onito and Excite Japan promised matches for those seeking partners, their algorithms pairing hopefuls in a society where arranged marriages were fading. Kane Kijima, a woman of unremarkable appearance but extraordinary cunning, saw opportunity in this digital frontier. To the men she met online, she was a dream, a cultured companion, a devoted fiancé, a beacon of warmth in their isolated lives. But Kijima was no savior. She was a chameleon, her every word a step toward destruction. Kojima's past was a patchwork of half-truths. Born in Hokkaido in 1974, she grew up in a middle-class family. Her early years marked by academic promise but social detachment. By her 20s, she was adrift, her resume a mix of short-lived jobs and petty scams. She claimed to be a trained chef, a piano teacher, a graduate student. None of it true, but delivered with a conviction that disarmed skepticism. Her real talent was manipulation, a skill honed through years of small cons. By 2007, with kokatsu sites booming, Kojima found her perfect stage, a place where lonely men were eager to believe her lies. Her victims were carefully chosen, middle-aged, financially stable, emotionally vulnerable. Takao Terada, 53, was a company employee in Chiba, a widower whose quiet life revolved around work and memories of his late wife. Kenzo Ando, 80, was a retired businessman in Saitama, his wealth a comfort in his solitary years. Yoshiyuki Unide, 41, was an office worker in Tokyo, divorced and yearning for connection. Each man met through Konkatsu's platforms saw Kojima as their second chance at love. She tailored her persona for each devoted partner to Terada, respectful companion to Ando, soulmate to Oide. Her promises of marriage allured they couldn't resist. Kojima's method was as meticulous as it was cruel. She began with seduction, her messages tender, her dates filled with laughter and shared dreams. Coffee shops, karaoke bars, quiet dinners. She played the role of the perfect partner, her attentiveness a balm to their loneliness. Once trust was secured, she turned to extortion, spinning tales of financial woes, a sick relative, a looming debt, a dream of starting a business together. The men, smitten, opened their wallets, handing over millions of yen in cash, loans, and gifts. Kijima's appetite was insatiable, her demands escalating until her victims were drained. Their savings gone, their hearts still hers. The killings came when the money ran dry or suspicion crept in. Kojima's weapon of choice was carbon monoxide poisoning, a method both silent and sinister. She lured each man to a rented apartment, plied them with sleeping pills disguised as medication, and sealed the room with tape. A charcoal stove, ignited in the confined space, filled the air with deadly gas, the men slipping into death as Kojima watched, her face unreadable. She staged each scene as a suicide, leaving notes in the victim's handwriting, forged with chilling precision, detailing despair or shame. To the world, these were broken men who chose to end their lives. To Kojima, they were obstacles removed with clinical efficiency. Takayo Terada was the first to fall on May 15, 2007. Found in his Chiba apartment, a stove smoldering beside him, his death was ruled a suicide, his notes citing financial ruin. Kinzo Ando followed on August 5, 2009. His Saitama home, a mirror of Terada's, the same forged despair, the same staged grief. Yoshiyuki Oide, the last known victim, died on January 30th, 2009 in a Tokyo rental. His body discovered days later, the scene eerily familiar. Each death raised no immediate alarm. Japan's high suicide rate and the men's isolation made the rulings plausible. Kojima, ever the phantom, moved on, her bank account swollen, her next target already in her sights. The unraveling began with a whisper of doubt. Ole's sister, unconvinced by the suicide narrative, pressed police to dig deeper. She pointed to his recent fiancée, a woman he'd met online, who drained his savings before his death. Investigators, initially skeptical, cross-referenced similar cases, stumbling on Chirado and Ando's deaths. The parallels were striking. Charcoal stoves, forged notes, and a mysterious woman at the heart of each man's final months. Bank records revealed large transfers to a single account linked to Kanai Kojima, a name now tied to multiple Konkatsu profiles. On November 5, 2009, Tokyo police arrested her, their net closing around a killer who thought she was untouchable. Kijima's interrogation was a battle of wits. She denied everything, her voice calm, her lies seamless. I loved them, she claimed, tears welling for effect. They were depressed, I couldn't save them. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial trails showed over 200 million yen, $2 million, 0 cents, funneled from the victims, spent on luxury goods, apartments, and Kijima's lavish lifestyle. Digital forensics uncovered her Konkatsu accounts, each profile a tailored trap. Handwriting experts confirmed the suicide notes were forgeries, their loops and strokes matching Kojima's own. A search of her apartment revealed sleeping pills, charcoal stoves, and a notebook with cryptic entries. Dates, names, sums, a ledger of death. The trial, beginning in 2011, was a media frenzy in Japan where female serial killers were rare and Konkatsu sites a new frontier. The Tokyo District Court was packed, reporters scribbling as prosecutors laid out a chilling case. Kijima, they argued, was a black widow. Her murders premeditated, her greed boundless. They presented bank records, witness testimonies from victims' families, and forensic evidence tying her to the crime scenes. A key witness, a former boyfriend, described Kojima's cold detachment, her boasts of easy money from men she despised. The prosecution sought the death penalty, a rare sentence for a woman, arguing her crimes were heinous beyond redemption. Kojima's defense was a study in deflection. Her lawyers claimed she was a victim of circumstance, a woman trapped in a cycle of poverty and abuse, her scams a survival tactic. The deaths, they argued, were suicides, the men driven to despair by their own failures, not Kojima's actions. She took the stand, her voice soft, her story shifting. Yes, she took money, but only as gifts. Yes, she was present, but never intended harm. Her tears, once persuasive, now seemed rehearsed, her charm fading under the courtroom's glare. The jury, a panel of judges in Japan's system, saw through the act, their verdict shaped by the weight of evidence. On April 13, 2012, Kojima was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and fraud. The court's ruling was unflinching. Her actions were calculated, her lack of remorse absolute. Sentenced to death by hanging, Kojima stood motionless, her face a mask as the gavel fell. Appeals followed, her lawyers arguing procedural errors and gender bias. But the Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2014, sealing her fate. Kojima, now 50, remains on death row in Tokyo's detention center, her execution date uncertain, her story a grim legend in Japan's true crime annals. The victims' families, scarred by loss, found no solace in the verdict. Terada's daughter, a teenager when he died, spoke of a father stolen by a stranger's greed. Ando's son, inheriting only memories, mourned a man who deserved peace. Oide's sister, the catalyst for justice, carried guilt for not acting sooner, her grief a constant companion. Their stories, overshadowed by Kojima's infamy, were a reminder of the human cost. Lives ended, futures erased, all for a woman's fleeting wealth. Kojima's haul, spent on designer clothes and rent, was a pittance compared to the pain she inflicted. Japan's response was a reckoning for the digital age. Konkatsu sites, once seen as harmless, faced scrutiny, their lax oversight blamed for enabling predators like Kojima. And Nito and others introduced background checks, user verification, and warnings about financial scams. The government pushed for stricter cybercrime laws, targeting online fraud and identity theft. Public discourse, often reserved in Japan, erupted. How could a woman wield such power over men? Was society's pressure to marry a factor, or Kojima's own pathology? The case challenged stereotypes, exposing the vulnerability of men in a culture that prized stoicism. Kojima's shadow lingered in other ways. Police revisited cold cases, suspecting her in additional deaths. Men who died by suicide in similar circumstances, their bank accounts emptied. At least 5 cases from 2006 to 2009 bore her hallmarks. But evidence was thin, the trail cold. Her silence on death row, broken only by cryptic letters to supporters, offered no clarity. Japan's death penalty, already divisive, faced renewed debate. Supporters saw Kojima's sentence as justice for calculated evil. Critics argued it ignored her own traumas, a chance for rehabilitation lost. The nation, grappling with modernity's perils, tightened its guard, but the internet remained a hunting ground. Kojima's life in detention is a quiet limbo. Reports describe a womanly detached, her days spent reading, her nights untroubled by guilt. Her execution, when it comes, will be swift. Japan's gallows, a private end to a public saga. The Konkatsu world, reshaped by her crimes, carries on. Its users warier but still hopeful. The apartments where her victims died, Chiba, Saitama, Tokyo, are lived in again, their walls silent witnesses to a killer's craft. Japan, ever resilient, learned that love, like trust, can be a weapon when wielded by the wrong hands. As the rain falls tonight, picture Kunai Kojima at a keyboard, her fingers crafting lies that promised forever. Imagine her victims, their hearts open, unaware of the shadow closing in. See the apartment sealed and silent, where life slipped away under her watchful eye. Was Kojima a monster born to destroy, or a woman shaped by a world that rewarded deceit? Did justice honor the dead, or merely silence their killer? And what of the digital age, where connection is a click away, but so is danger? These questions linger like mist over Tokyo, a reminder that love, when twisted, can be the deadliest trap of all. Story 11, Prita Mulyasari's defamation case. In the bustling heart of Tangerang, Indonesia, where the hum of daily life drowns out whispers of injustice, a single email sparked a firestorm that shook a nation. Prita Mulyasari, a 32-year-old housewife and mother, was an ordinary woman whose voice, amplified by the digital age, became a battle cry against corporate overreach. In 2009, her criticism of a hospital's care landed her in a courtroom facing charges of defamation under a law that turned words into weapons. What began as a personal grievance grew into a movement, a nation's stand for free speech against the weight of power. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's step into the crowded streets of Jakarta where one woman's fight exposed the fragility of truth in a world quick to silence it. This is a story of courage, resistance, and the cost of speaking out. When the odds are stacked against you. Prita Mulyasari was no activist, no rebel seeking fame. In 2008, she was a devoted mother of two, living a quiet life in Tangerang, a satellite city of Jakarta. Her days revolved around her children, her husband, and the small joys of family. But in August of that year, illness disrupted her routine. Suffering from a high fever and dizziness, she sought treatment at Omni International Hospital, a private facility known for its modern equipment and high fees. What should have been a straightforward visit turned into a nightmare, a misdiagnosis that left Prita weaker, her trust in the system shaken. Her story, though, was not just about medical error. It was about what happened when she dared to speak. At Omni, Prita was diagnosed with dengue fever, a common tropical illness, and treated with injections and IV fluids. But her condition worsened, her symptoms defying the doctor's assurances. Discharged after days of costly care, she sought a second opinion at another hospital, where tests revealed a shocking truth. Prita didn't have dengue. Her illness was likely a viral infection, possibly mumps, mismanaged by Omni's staff. Blood tests, mishandled by the hospital's lab, had led to the wrong diagnosis, prolonging her suffering and draining her family's savings. Angry but resolute, Prita decided to share her experience, a decision that would change her life forever. In September 2008, Prita wrote an email to friends and family detailing her ordeal at Omni. The message was candid but measured, describing the misdiagnosis, the unnecessary treatments, and her frustration with the hospital's lack of accountability. "I want others to be careful," she wrote, her words of warning born of concern, not malice. The email, sent to a small circle, might have faded into obscurity, but in the age of the internet, words travel fast. Friends forwarded it, then strangers shared it, and soon Priya's story was viral, a digital whisper that grew into a roar. Blogs and forums buzzed with her tale, amplifying her voice across Indonesia, a nation where healthcare grievances were all too common. Omni International Hospital, stung by the public backlash, didn't respond with apologies or reforms. Instead, they struck back with the full force of their influence. In October 2008, the hospital filed a civil lawsuit against Prita, claiming her email had damaged their reputation and cost them business. They demanded 500 million rupiah, $50,000, 0 cents, in damages, a sum far beyond Prita's means. But Omni didn't stop there. They escalated the matter to criminal charges, accusing Prita of defamation under Indonesia's 2008 Electronic Information and Transactions (ITE) law, a statute critics called a blunt tool for silencing dissent. The law allowed for up to 6 years in prison and fines of 1 billion rupiah, $100,000, 0 cents, for spreading false and defamatory information online. Prita's world turned upside down. In May 2009, police arrested her at her home, their presence a jarring intrusion into her quiet life. Handcuffed in front of her children, she was taken to Tangerang Women's Prison, her bail denied as prosecutors built their case. The charges were a chilling mix: criminal defamation under the ITE law and insult under Indonesia's penal code. Prita, a housewife with no legal training, faced a system weighted against her, where wealth and power often trumped truth. Her husband, Andri, a small business owner, scrambled to hire a lawyer, their savings dwindling as the battle loomed. The investigation was a study in overreach. Prosecutors leaned on Omni's claims, arguing Prita's email was a deliberate attack, its viral spread proof of her intent to harm. They pointed to the hospital's financial losses, canceled appointments, a dip in patients as evidence of damage, ignoring the broader context of public distrust in private healthcare. Prita's email, they claimed, was false and misleading, though they offered no proof her account was inaccurate. Medical records, which could have clarified the misdiagnosis, were curiously absent, Omni citing privacy while Prita's team struggled to access them. The case, built on shaky ground, seemed less about justice and more about punishment. Prita's detention sparked outrage. In Tangerang and beyond, her story resonated with ordinary Indonesians who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles. Faceless systems, unaccountable institutions, a legal code that favored the powerful. Social media, still nascent in 2009, became a battleground. The hashtag #PantiPrita helped Prita trending on Twitter, while Facebook groups rallied thousands to her cause. A grassroots campaign, Coins for Prita, urged citizens to donate small change to cover her fines, a symbolic act of defiance against Omni's wealth. Collection boxes appeared in markets, cafes, and mosques, their clinking coins a chorus of solidarity. The trial, held in Tangerang District Court in June 2009, was a spectacle. Prita, pale but composed, faced a packed courtroom, her supporters spilling into the streets. Prosecutors painted her as a reckless agitator, her email a digital bomb that threatened public order. Omni's lawyers, sharp-suited and confident, presented hospital staff who claimed Prita's words had demoralized them, their testimony thin on specifics. The defense, led by a young lawyer named Manola Sebayang, took a different tack. They argued Prita's email was a consumer complaint protected as free speech, and that Omni's response was a bullying tactic to silence criticism. This is not about defamation, Manola said, but about a hospital afraid of the truth. Evidence, or the lack of it, was the case's crux. Prita's team demanded Omni produce her medical records to verify the misdiagnosis, but the hospital stonewalled their delays, raising suspicions of cover-up. Witnesses for Prita, friends, family, even a doctor from the second hospital confirmed her illness and the errors in Omni's care. But the court, bound by procedure, gave their words little weight. The ITE law, vague and draconian, loomed large, its language favoring the accuser. Prita, testifying in her own defense, spoke with quiet conviction. "I only wanted to warn others. I never meant to hurt anyone." Her words, simple and sincere, struck a chord with the public, if not the judge. On July 8, 2009, the court delivered a mixed verdict. Prita was acquitted of criminal insult, the judge deeming her email lacked malicious intent. But on the defamation charge, she was found guilty, sentenced to 6 months in prison, and fined 204 million rupiah, $20,000, 0 cents. The ruling was a blow. Prita avoided jail, but the fine was a crushing burden, and the conviction branded her a criminal. Omni emboldened pressed their civil suit, their demand for 500 million rupiah, a sword over Prita's head. The public outrage doubled their efforts, the Koinuru Prita campaign raising millions in days, a testament to a nation's anger. The case didn't end in Tangerang. Prita's lawyers appealed, taking the fight to the Supreme Court, while activists lobbied for her cause in Jakarta. The movement grew, drawing students, journalists, and even politicians who saw in Prita a symbol of Indonesia's fragile democracy. Protests outside Omni's gates demanded accountability, their chants echoing through the capital. The hospital, facing a PR disaster, began to falter. Patients boycotted its services, and media exposes uncovered other complaints: overbilling, negligence, a pattern of arrogance. Omni's civil suit, once a sure bet, became a liability, their reputation crumbling under the weight of public scorn. In December 2009, the Supreme Court delivered a historic ruling. Citing insufficient evidence of intent, they overturned Prita's defamation conviction, declaring her innocent on all charges. The decision was a triumph, a rare victory for the individual against a system rigged for the powerful. Omni, sensing the tide, dropped their civil suit days later, their retreat a tacit admission of defeat. Prita, tearful but radiant, stood outside the courthouse, her children in her arms as supporters cheered. "This is for all of us," she said, her voice steady, a housewife transformed into a hero. The aftermath was a turning point for Indonesia. The ITE law, exposed as a tool for oppression, faced intense scrutiny. Lawmakers, pressured by activists, amended it in 2016, narrowing the definition of defamation and reducing penalties, though critics argued it remained flawed. The case spurred a broader push for free speech, with bloggers, journalists, and citizens demanding protections against corporate and state censorship. Indonesia's digital landscape, vibrant but vulnerable, gained new safeguards, guidelines for online complaints, consumer rights hotlines, and media watchdogs to monitor abuse. Prita's life, Forever changed, took a quieter path. She shunned the spotlight, focusing on her family. Though she spoke at rallies when pressed, her story a beacon for others. The Koino no Prita funds exceeding her fines were donated to charity, a gesture that cemented her legacy. Omni International, battered by boycotts, rebranded and reformed, their practices under stricter oversight. Tangkugrang, a city of workers and dreamers, embraced Prita as one of their own, their pride a shield against the memory of her ordeal. Indonesia, still grappling with corruption and power, learned that a single voice amplified by many could shift the balance. The case's shadow stretched beyond Jakarta. Globally, it became a case study in digital rights, cited by activists from Malaysia to Mexico. The power of social media, harnessed by Koinu Prita, inspired movements worldwide, proof that small acts could topple giants. Yet the IDT law's legacy lingered. Dozens faced similar charges in the years that followed, their stories less fortunate, their voices drowned out. Prita's victory, while monumental, was a reminder of the fight still ahead, a democracy tested by every silenced word. Prita Mulyasari's story is a mirror to resilience. Was she a criminal, as Omni claimed, or a citizen exercising her right to speak? Did her victory heal a nation's wounds or merely expose them? And what of the digital age, where a single email can spark a revolution or ruin a life? As the rain falls tonight, picture Prita in her cell. Her children's faces her only light. Imagine the coins clinking in boxes across Tangerine, each one a vote for justice. Her fight, like ripples on a stormy sea, reminds us that truth, when spoken, can move mountains, even when the world demands silence. The night stretches on, and one final tale awaits. A story of violence and accountability, warped by human hands. From a police force's betrayal in Dehradun, the rain carries us deeper into the shadows. Stay with us as the darkness unveils truths too heavy to bear. Story 12, the Dehradun police kidnapping case. In the mist-shrouded hills of Dehradun, India, where the Himalayan foothills cradle a city of quiet charm, a chilling betrayal unfolded in the summer of 2008. The men sworn to protect, officers of the Uttarakhand police, became predators, a mask for greed and violence. Their target was Anupam Gupta, a 28-year-old businessman whose success made him a mark for a crime so brazen it shook a nation's faith in its guardian. The kidnapping, orchestrated by those meant to uphold the law, was a descent into darkness. A conspiracy that left blood on the streets and questions that linger like fog over the Mussoorie Hills. As the rain falls softly tonight, let's walk the shadowed lanes of Dehradun, where trust was shattered and justice fought to reclaim its name. This is a story of corruption, courage, and the haunting cost of power turned against the innocent. Dehradun, nestled in Uttarakhand, was a city of contrasts in 2008, a blend of colonial elegance, spiritual retreats, and a growing urban pulse. Anupam Gupta fit its modern face, a young entrepreneur whose computer hardware business thrived in the city's tech boom. His shop on Rajpur Road, stocked with the latest PCs and peripherals, was a hub for students and professionals, his smile a fixture in the community. Married to his college sweetheart, Neha, and father to a 2-year-old daughter, Anupam was a man on the rise, his ambition tempered by kindness. But success, in a city where envy simmered, painted a target on his back. The Uttarakhand police, tasked with keeping Dehradun's peace, were a mixed lot. Many were honest, their days spent patrolling markets or managing tourist crowds, but others, tainted by the rot of systemic corruption, saw their badges as licenses for profit. Low salaries, political pressure, and a culture of impunity bred a dangerous subset, officers who moonlighted as criminals, their authority a weapon. By 2008, whispers of police misconduct were common. Extortion rackets, staged encounters, and favors for the powerful. Anupam, with his growing wealth and lack of political clout, was the perfect prey for a scheme that would expose this underbelly. The kidnapping was planned with chilling precision. The mastermind was Sub-Inspector Vijay Pal, a 38-year-old veteran with a reputation for bending rules. Pal, stationed at Dalanwala Police Station, had a network of loyal officers and informants, his charm masking a ruthless streak. His accomplices included Constable Sanjay Negi, Rajesh Bisht, and Nitin Chauhan, all young and eager for quick cash, and 2 civilian informants, Manoj Kumar and Deepak Sharma, who scouted targets. Anupam's name surfaced through Kumar, a local tout who'd noticed the businessman's flashy car and steady stream of clients. To Pal, Anupam was a jackpot, a man with money but no connections to fend off a shakedown. The plan was simple: abduct Anupam, demand a ransom, and release him with threats to ensure silence. The police uniforms, far from a liability, were their greatest asset. No one would question officers detaining a man in broad daylight. On July 12, 2008, at 6:45 p.m., the trap was set. Anupam, closing his shop after a long day, stepped onto Rajpur Road. A police jeep, unmarked but official, pulled up. Pal, in uniform, approached with Negi and Bisht, their faces stern. "You're under investigation," Pal said, his voice clipped. "Come with us." Anupam, confused but compliant, followed, unaware he was stepping into a nightmare. The jeep sped toward Premnagar, a quiet suburb on Dehradun's outskirts. Inside, Anupam's questions were met with silence, then threats. "We know about your black money," Paul lied, his eyes cold. "Cooperate, or your family suffers." At a secluded farmhouse rented by Sharma, Anupam was blindfolded and bound, his phone confiscated. The officers, now joined by Cha and Kumar and Sharma, shed their pretense. They demanded 50 lakh rupees, $100,000, a sum they believed Anupam could pay. Calls were made to Neha, her voice trembling as Pal's distorted demands echoed through a burner phone. "Get the money by tomorrow, or he's dead," he said, the line going silent. Neha, frantic, turned to her brother, Vikram, a lawyer with contacts in Dehradun's legal circles. She reported the kidnapping to Clement Town Police Station, but the response was sluggish. Officers seemed reluctant, their questions vague. Vikram, sensing something amiss, bypassed local police, contacting the Uttarakhand Director General Police, DGP, directly. His call, made at 9:30 p.m., lit a fire. In the DGP, alarmed by the possibility of rogue officers, ordered a special task force led by Superintendent Ashok Kumar, a no-nonsense investigator known for cracking tough cases. The hunt was on. But time was Anupam's enemy. The task force moved with urgency. Neha's description of the ransom calls, coupled with Anupam's last known location, narrowed the search to Premnagar. Cell tower data, a new tool in 2008, traced the burner phone to a radius near the farmhouse. Kumar's team, working through the night, interviewed shopkeepers and auto rickshaw drivers, one of whom recalled a police jeep speeding toward Premnagar. A tip from a local informant, wary of Pal's crew, pointed to the farmhouse, its lights burning late. At 4:15 a.m. on July 13, the task force surrounded the property, their weapons drawn, their silence absolute. The raid was chaos. Pal, caught off guard, reached for his service pistol, but Kumar's team was faster, disarming him and his men. Anupam, found in a locked room, was bruised but alive, his relief tempered by fear. The officers, Pal, Negi, Bishte, and Chauhan, were handcuffed alongside Kumar and Sharma, their uniforms now a mark of shame. Evidence piled up. The burner phone, rope matching Anupam's bindings, and 5 lakh rupees in cash, a partial ransom Neha had gathered but not yet delivered. Anupam's statement given at the scene was damning. They wore police badges, but they were criminals. The investigation exposed a web of corruption that stunned Dehradun. Pal, the ringleader, had a history of shakedowns, his personnel file dotted with complaints dismissed by superiors. Negi, Busht, and Chauhan, all in their 20s, were drawn in by promises of easy money. Their loyalty to Pal absolute. Kumar and Sharma, the civilians, were petty crooks, their roles scouting victims for a cut of the profits. Interrogations revealed the group had targeted others before Anupam, small traders, low-level officials, extorting lakhs under the guise of investigations. The farmhouse, a frequent hideout, held traces of earlier crimes, bloodstains, forged documents, a ledger of payoffs. The public reaction was explosive. Dehradun, a city that prided itself on tranquility, erupted in protest, citizens marching to the Dalanwala station with signs reading, "Police or thieves?" Media outlets from the Times of India to local dailies ran exposés, their headlines screaming of betrayal. Anupam's story, shared in a tearful press conference, became a rallying cry. I trusted them because they were police. Never again. Neha's voice of strength demanded accountability, her courage galvanizing a community. The Uttarakhand government, under pressure, suspended the entire Donawala station's leadership, a symbolic purge that did little to quell public rage. A trial held in Dehradun's district court in 2009 was a reckoning. The 6 men faced charges of kidnapping for ransom, criminal conspiracy, and abuse of power under India's penal code. Pal, as the mastermind, bore the brunt, charged additionally with extortion and evidence tampering. Prosecutors, led by a seasoned advocate, presented a watertight case. Anupam's testimony, forensic evidence, and call logs tying the burner phone to Pal. Neha's brother Vikram testified to the police initial inaction, a damning indictment of systemic rot. The defense, scrambling, claimed Anupam's business was shady, the kidnapping a misunderstanding over unpaid debts. The argument collapsed under scrutiny, the evidence too stark. Witnesses painted a vivid picture. A shopkeeper near Rajpur Road recalled Pal's Jeep circling Anupam's store days before, a predator stalking prey. A farmer near the farmhouse described late-night visits by men in uniforms, their laughter chilling in retrospect. And Upam, taking the stand, spoke with quiet resolve. They didn't just take my freedom, they took my trust in the law. His words, carried by live broadcast, struck a nerve, the courtroom silence save for the scribbling of reporters. Pal, defiant, smirked through much of the trial, his arrogance a final act of bravado. On March 15, 2010, the verdict came down. Vijay Paul was sentenced to life imprisonment, the judge calling him a stain on the uniform. Negi, Bisht, and Chauhan received 10 years each, their youth no shield against accountability. Kumar and Sharma, as accomplices, got 7 years, their civilian status a slight reprieve. The court also fined the group 2 lakh rupees each, the money earmarked for Anupam's family. As rested, tears erupted outside, where hundreds had gathered, their faith in justice restored, if only for a moment. The officers, stripped of rank, were led away, their badges now relics of disgrace. The aftermath was a seismic shift for Uttarakhand. The case exposed the police force's vulnerabilities, corruption, lax oversight, a culture that rewarded loyalty over ethics. The DGP, under fire, launched reforms, mandatory ethics training, anonymous tip lines for reporting misconduct, and stricter vetting for recruits. Dalanwala Station was overhauled, its new leadership tasked with rebuilding trust. Community policing programs sprang up, officers meeting residents in town halls, their presence a gesture of amends. Anupam, hailed as a survivor, became an advocate. Speaking at forums about police reform, his voice steady despite the trauma. Nationally, the case fueled a broader reckoning. India's police, long plagued by corruption scandals, faced renewed scrutiny. Activists cited Dehradun as proof of systemic flaws. Underpaid officers, political interference, a lack of accountability. The Supreme Court, in a 2010 ruling inspired by similar cases, mandated independent oversight boards, though implementation lagged. Media investigations uncovered parallel rackets in other states, from Maharashtra to Uttar Pradesh, each one a mirror to Pal's crew. The public, galvanized, demanded change. Their protests a reminder that trust, once broken, must be earned anew. Anupam and Neha rebuilt their lives, though scars remained. Their daughter, too young to understand, grew up hearing stories of her father's courage. In Upam's business, recovered his shop, a symbol of resilience. But he installed cameras and hired security, his faith in authority forever altered. Neha, a quiet force, joined local women's groups, her story inspiring others to speak out. Dehradun, healing slowly, embraced its role as a catalyst, its hills a backdrop to a city determined to rise above its shame. The farmhouse, raised in 2011, became a park, its green expanse a quiet rebuke to the darkness it once held. The Dehradun kidnapping case is a mirror to human trust. Were Pal and his men monsters or products of a system that rewarded greed? Did justice heal Anupam's wounds or merely punish his betrayers? And what of the police, guardians turned predators? Can reform cleanse their ranks, or will corruption always find a way? As the rain falls tonight, picture Anupam in that Jeep, his world shrinking to a blindfold's darkness. Imagine Neha, her voice breaking as she pleads for his life. In the task force, their flashlights cutting through the night. Their story, like a stone in a still pond, ripples through time. A reminder that justice, when fought for, can light even the darkest paths. As the rain weaves its final threads through the night, we leave the shadows of Dehradun, where trust was tested and courage prevailed. These 12 tales, from the blood-soaked cells of Beaumont to the digital traps of Tokyo, have carried us through the labyrinth of human darkness, where greed, rage, and betrayal write stories too heavy to forget. In shadows of the past, we've walked with victims and villains, their choices a mirror to the fragile line between right and wrong. Preeta's defiance, Anupam's survival, Meredith's stolen light. They linger, their echoes a call to listen, to question, to seek truth. The black screen fades, but the past does not. It whispers in the rain, urging us to remember the lives lost, the battles fought, the secrets buried. Thank you for joining us in Volume 33, where the night has been our canvas and the stories our paint. Until we meet again, let the rain guide you to sleep, but keep one eye on the shadows. They hold truths the light cannot contain. This is Shadows of the Past, signing off as the darkness claims its own.